Don't I get money, you change? What you thought we was the same? Still stay away from them clones. Niggas better leave me alone. Talking about niggas is low. Run with niggas who don't know you. Whoa, I make that zagging when city to city. You niggas not hot in your state. If it was money to get a hit Henny, we get it and never complain. Same go for the gang, and we split it up all the same. I can't really eat, let's stay straight, cause we go way back in the day. My day ones from back in the day, they still hang around me today. You wanna come round us, you can't. I'm rolling up loud, it's great. But mama, she bad but complain, cause I'm too in love with my dreams. And I gotta get on the plane, and go get this money with Dizzy. I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang.
I get the bag with the gang, taking that Zach to the bank. Henny be all in my drink. You niggas is stupid, you think that should change? You not even hot in your gang. Ain't nothing even hot about your gang. You niggas be lying about same. Be posting them pictures of guns for the fame. Niggas just look at me different now. Say that's your man, but he a clown. But fuck around with the fuck arounds. Little nigga, you should cut it out. Me and my niggas take different routes. Punch a bitch nigga all in his mouth. Hold up my nigga, we different now. I need a Robert, it's just my style. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I get a bitch today, she probably a foreign model. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I'm with my gang today, tomorrow never promise.
OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang.
Attention, please. Please do not smoke in the terminal building. Smoking is only permitted in the specified smoking areas.
Zach. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate. Niggas don't know what to think. Don't I get money, you change? What you thought we was the same? Still stay away from them clones. Niggas better leave me alone. Talking about niggas is low. Run with niggas who don't know you. Whoa, I make that zagging when city to city. You niggas not hot in your state.
I think I'm cute. I know I'm sexy. I've got the look that drives the girls wild. I got the moves that really move them. I send chills up and down their spines. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I make them hot. I make them shiver. Theists get weak whenever I'm around. They see me walk. They hear me talk. I make them feel like their God ain't real. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. That mic flipped up. Hands off the merchandise. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. Welcome everybody to another edition of the Pocket Locker Podcast. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. All right, folks, we've got another great show lined up for you this evening. Before we get into it, we are getting started for the week here. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope you are having a fantastic Monday. And before we get going with our program here, I want to encourage all of you who are not already to join us in Gather. Gather is your key to linking up with the gang and staying in touch with the community, literally 24/7. And it's just been such a game changer and the real home base for community building for us. And so I'm gonna, try to get back on schedule with making sure I do quick tutorials or videos about Gather and Discord at least a couple times a week to get people a feel for what's going on. So let's go ahead and check out this quick video.
Before I could even start the video call, I had to create my own little avatar, could customize my hair and my t-shirt. And then once I hit go, it plopped me into this virtual space that like Pokemon or something like that. Gather is a very, very new startup, and they create these virtual event spaces and virtual offices that are, as they put it, in the metaverse. You can get dozens of people into this one virtual world. So it really just creates this sense of space, this virtual space, as if you were sort of meeting someone in real life, like in an office or at some kind of conference.
So I grew up in Bellevue, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle. I grew up on these online math communities, but they were all forums. The most that I got to know these people was through text, and you would meet up for in-person math camp, maybe for 1 week a year. And a lot of these same people would be there. And that'd be the best week of all of our lives. Eventually kind of got into programming, as that was kind of math, but applicable to the real life. During college was kind of working on all sorts of passion projects, always doing it with friends. So then come after college, a lot of our closest friends were moving to different cities. And the status quo is that you just talk less with them over time, and their relationship would falter. And we thought that was such a shame, that you could do much better. We decided to work on how can you have high quality relationships with people no matter where they are. We tried a ton of different experiments that whole year, eventually getting into these ideas of virtual worlds with virtual reality.
They put on headsets and they were working in those headsets in a virtual office together for 8 hours a day. in 2020, VR was still, very far away from being the type of product that's ready for mass adoption. And even today in 2022, that's still very much the case. But it gave them a bit of an inkling that, there was this high potential here for these virtual gatherings.
We didn't meet in real life for the first year of founding the company. Or actually, they didn't meet each other. So I knew all of them individually, but the three of the rest of them never met each other. What the pandemic did was it created the appetite for trying something like Gather. Basically, the first day that we launched it to the public, there was just insane demand in all sorts of ways. Like, we just published it as, here you can come into like a virtual Times Square. There's nothing you could really do in there yet. We got so many emails from people saying like, hey, can I run my professional conference on here? Or hey, like, can I run my wedding on here? Or I have a virtual immersive theater event. Like, very, very wide range of things. And we were like, okay, we just need to like work as hard as possible to keep up with all of this.
It really just kind of took off by word of mouth. It's been used for all kinds of different things. Coca-Cola used it for virtual conferences. Amazon Prime Video created a gather space, and it's being used in smaller scale capacities too, for birthday parties and weddings, or rock concerts. They are already valued at $700 million by venture capitalists. That's their private market valuation. They've raised in total $77 million from the likes of Sequoia Capital, Excel, and Y Combinator, which was the accelerator program that they went through.
The point of the metaverse is really about that human connection. And we see things like Gather being a very important communication layer, one that builds kind of more community, more camaraderie, and can get you more of those like kind of serendipitous interactions that are so important in physical space.
All right. Whoops. All right. Awesome. Yeah, so for us, Gather's like a virtual ranch. We have an office.
Convo 323.
We have little tents we hang out in. Currently, we are at our cafe. So I do encourage you guys to come check it out. The link is pinned in the chat. It's also down in the description. I also want to send a special thank you out to all the people who support our Gather effort. There is a bit of a monthly fee that our members pay. They're free up until 10 people, but above 10 people, there's a cost. We pay $7 per person per month. And so the people that are members here, they really do actually support the channel because they allow us to have a Gather that goes up to 20 people. But yeah, I'm really thankful to you guys that you guys have kind of brought into the vision, and that we have this wonderful space with extra capacity so that people who are new can join us and hang out and have a much better experience with the community, and hopefully they'll decide to join us one day too if they can. All right, so let's go ahead and get ready for our broadcast today. I really am excited about today's show because I've been trying to work through so many things myself, personally, emotionally, with like what to even do with this channel in light of everything that's been going on, and still trying to make really fun and meaningful content, and at the same time address important issues. And there's some things that have been on my mind for a while, and I think I've kind of put together a way to get through them. And I have a little bit of time on my hands because I was given some extra time to stay in my place before I move. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into this. Actually, I need to set a quick reminder on my phone to do something. Give me 1 second. Yeah, let me set this For all right, thanks, gang. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's do our communion. You definitely want to catch a vibe, kick back, greet your neighbors. Y'all already know how to do this thing. Please raise your glasses and hold on to your asses. Through him, with him, in the unity of the flying man. All glory and honor is yours who flied for our sins forever and ever. You may drink. Straight whiskey, little bit of caffeine boost. Why? What happened? Oh, autoplay got turned on. I was like, autoplay ruins my life, and I definitely always make sure it's off. All right, somehow I got turned back on. That's all right. All right, gang, y'all already know the drill. That was our communion hymn. And up next for you, we have our communion song. This one is another special mix of Thank You for Being a Friend. Let's go.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. Yeah. I'm not ashamed to say, yeah. I hope it always stays this way. Head is off. Won't you stand up and take a bow?
All right, I got Lena first.
And the Carter Dutch would say, thank you for being a friend. Yeah, thank you for being a friend. I want to thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being
Carrie Ann Chrysler is second.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not ashamed to say, yeah. I hope it all will stay this way. My hat is
And
off.
AR
Won't you
is third.
stand
All
up and
right.
take a bow? Yeah. Ooh, if you throw a party and invited everyone new, you would see the biggest gift would be from me. And the
All right, I got Lena, I got Carrie Ann, I got AR. None believers here, none. Make sure you join us and gather.
Thank you for
YouTube Funk is here.
Thank you for being a friend.
Crystal's in the house. Get your monkey ass and gather, Crystal. Ryan Coltastic, thanks for being here.
Please welcome Andrew
Why
Gold.
is stuff still autoplay? Oh, because when I pick these videos now, they're all autoplay. All right, well, let's take care of that. All right, so let's go ahead and cue this on up because I know that this is going to be something that, at least for me, it really is a representation of sort of the evolution of my own personal thinking. I can't remember when or how exactly. I think going through YouTube videos probably back when I was just looking for like debates and lectures and stuff that I first came across Daryl Davis, it definitely feels like it was before I participated in this community, because I remember when I think Pine Creek, and that should show you where we're going right there. I think Pine Creek was talking about him in a video or featured him in a video, and I kind of remember like everybody like really reacting to it and being me kind of being like, okay, yeah, I'm like, I already know this story. I've already seen this talk. So I can't remember exactly, but you know, I'll just say this: Daryl Davis, for those that don't know, he's a musician. He was featured in The Wire, and he's you know, I guess we should say famous for a very popular TED Talk that he gave, and other pieces that of mainstream media that have been done about him, you know, prior to the YouTube era, where he celebrated for attending KKK rallies and, you know, befriending Klans members, and eventually leading, I think probably at least a couple dozen or close to, I know at least 20 of them in one story reports, to leave the Klan. And when I first heard his story, given my experience that some of y'all are familiar with now, like being part of what was called the Race Relations Project at Penn State, it's now called World in Conversation. But it's sort of the project. So y'all have seen some of Sam Richards' class, right? My dog is named after Sam Richards. We've done a couple videos covering video reflections from Sam Richards' Sociology 119 course. It's called The Sociology of Race at Penn State. So we'll probably do some more. We've done something on white privilege and something again on racism against white people. So that's part of a larger project, right? Obviously at Penn State and in that community, not everyone gets to take the Social 119 class, right? And so the Race Relations Project was to go out in the other university spaces and in the wider community, like outside of the university, and facilitate those conversations in real life. So obviously when I get to an example like Daryl Davis, who's all about, look, you know, we can have conversations with our quote unquote enemies, so to speak, across these problematic social divides, and we can build bridges by building friendships and relationships and coming to understand each other. And obviously, as someone who not only just participated in that project, but has been dealing with real serious racism my whole life. Like I think all people of color are. We've all got our own stories, but for me, race is always on the table, always on the table. And I almost feel like I've done myself a disservice in this community, because this community has been such an escape for me, such an oasis, such a place to find community, especially with other skeptics and non-believers and humanists and people that are politically like me. I think I think people have not really had the opportunity to understand just how deeply affected my everyday life has been by racism. And I think for most of us, it's just straight up a womb to a tomb, a womb to the tomb story. We'll stop dealing with racism when we cease to breathe. But anyway, like that all, you know, had me really hyped on the Daryl Davis train. Like, this guy's awesome. You know, I really think what he's doing, what he's done is such a powerful example of peacemaking and de-radicalization and all of that stuff. So fast forward to today, I think it's a reasonable question to start off with. Well, then why the fuck would I make a video called the Daryl Davis problem. And I just want to say that it's first off, it's about layers and it's about nuance, and it's not an issue that I have with Daryl Davis or his activities per se. It's more my perspective now is really kind of informed by looking back and not just seeing what's going on and what the arguments are, what the ideas are, but who utilizes what ideas and to what end. And so I just want to be clear, it's not the Daryl Davis problem isn't that I have a problem with Daryl Davis. It's that I take issue with the way Daryl Davis's story and his example is misused, in my opinion, by people who have problematic positions when it comes to addressing racism. And the comparison that comes to mind is it's like saying, I don't have an issue with Martin Luther King Jr., his message and his civil rights leadership. Of course, I have some, it doesn't say we sign off on everything. Yeah, a lot of people know I'm very anti-theist, and so I don't appreciate all of that under the banner of Christianity and all that. But setting that aside, the point is this: I don't disagree overall with Dr. King. I do disagree with the way right-wingers roll out Dr. King, typically just around MLK Day, and all they go to is, oh, remember he said that man should be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, right? And then use that to essentially be, not anti-race, like to perpetuate the status quo, or to argue that we should not be having critical race theory taught to in the education system, or to sort of lower our racial consciousness, when clearly Dr. King did not stand for what he was doing as an effort to lower racial consciousness. And then it becomes complex too, because it then feeds into an issue with white moderates, right? So here's the spectrum of the issue, y'all, right? Let's just try to keep it relatively simple and say, I want to address the problems with this on the right and the left, right? And the problem on the right is that they're going to use an example like MLK, and I'm going to show you how we get that to Daryl Davis, but they're going to use an example like MLK on the right to say, oh, we shouldn't do CRT, don't worry about racism, we don't want white kids feeling bad about being white, and then that becomes a problem. And then the left will pick up that narrative, feed into it, at least think that has to be a pole of attraction in the sort of social sphere. And so then they insist that we sort of come to these compromises and these politics of civility and all this that enables the right-wing narrative. And then they overlook how critical Dr. King was of quote unquote white liberals, white progressives, who were playing the civility politics. So like the right is just bastardizing his message and his example, and then the left is literally selectively ignoring his criticism for the way that they respond to that stuff, as though he didn't know that. Like he was already like, no, I already see this playing out. This is why I'm so concerned about the white moderates and the white liberals. And y'all got to stop with this nonsense over here. And this is what I see happening with Daryl Davis. I'm trying to draw this out for y'all. Point number one, it's not an issue personally with me and Daryl Davis, but point number two, it's about how that example is being used by problematic people. And so that's what we're going to jump in today. We're gonna jump into a little bit more Daryl Davis's story, and why I think a lot of this comes out problematic, because people are hearing his message about civility, conversation, discussion, friendship. They're overlooking the fact that this is an active technique of de-radicalizing people. In other words, it's something he does to do work. It is not a form of rest. And it is necessitated by the threat that racism places on us. Therefore, it should not be celebrated as, oh, that's what the good ones do. It should be understood that this is part of the dehumanization. This is part of the oppression. This is part of the powerlessness. This is what racism looks like. It looks like you are so powerless in your ability to defend yourself that you are forced to come to terms with your oppressor out of a lack of other options to ensure your survival. That is the difference between saying, I came to a bar to have a civil discussion with a bigot because I need to make sure that bigot isn't going to continue to be a threat to my day-to-day existence. But a lot of people are just chilling at the bar, having drinks, having a bunch of laughs, watching the game, throwing darts with the bigots. And then when they're called out for just socializing with bigots, kicking it like, let's play some cards, it's all love, they're like, no. Have you ever heard of Daryl Davis? Yeah, and do you see how Daryl Davis, well, he goes to Klans rallies, and he's sitting there eating hot dogs, having barbecues, drinking grape soda, having laughs with his KKK friends. So what seems to be the problem? Right? That's those two things are way totally fucking different. And when people don't see and understand that difference, they get themselves in trouble. Because you're no longer using this discussion or this socialization as a means to an end, as a technique, as a modus operandi to get the work done. You just chilling, having buddy time with some bigots, and then going to turn around and tell the rest of us we got to be okay with it. Like, we don't understand the difference. So that's what we're going to try to make sure people leave here with a better understanding of. And of course, I haven't seen all of the stuff that we're going to respond to, so it's just going to be me reacting and getting it into it with y'all. So let's go ahead and get it done.
Daryl Davis, the only black man you'll ever find at a KKK rally.
Do you think there's a point where kind of crossing the line and helping their cause?
No.
He even calls some of the members his friends.
All right, my friend.
Somebody violated their oath.
My end goal is to bring people together.
Well, I got to get along
exactly,
with
you
Ku
two,
Klux
punk. You're
Klan,
on it. You're on
unashamedly
it.
extreme right-wing sect with one fanatical aim: white supremacy.
They are weaponizing the man's example against other black people and progressives. That is fantastic.
Distance.
You're not being serious.
Fantastically
right?
said.
They felt I was inferior.
Mind over matter. I don't mind because you don't matter.
You've been trying to infiltrate the Klan, but what does that do for people?
Well, I'll tell you what.
They are not human. There's nothing about these people that are human.
I don't give a shit about you or your KKK hood.
He felt I sold out my own race.
It's not like a fetish.
How can you hate me when you don't even know me?
The truth behind why Daryl is doing the unthinkable.
I began seeking out leaders of the Ku Klux Klan.
White power.
His secretary scheduled an interview with Roger Kelly, but didn't tell him Davis was black.
Said, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly, he will kill you. He comes in, a handgun in his holster. This is an ambush. My mind is racing 100 miles an hour. I have seen the future. I know what can be done. I fear for my life. His name was Roger Kelly, and I'd managed to get his address and phone number from someone. Said, Daryl, do not go to Roger Kelly's house. Roger Kelly will kill you. I gave my secretary the phone number for him. I wanted her to call him as opposed to me. He might pick up in my voice that I'm black. So she called him, and he agreed to do the interview.
All right, you two, I appreciate you.
For this motel room. I gave Mary some money to get some soda pop out of the machine, put it in the ice bucket, get it cold. Right on time, 5:15. Mary hops up, runs around the corner, opens the door. I'm seated back here where you cannot see me from the hallway. In walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk, means bodyguard, security. He's wearing military camouflage fatigues, and right here he has a semi-automatic handgun in his holster. Mr. Kelly is walking directly behind him, and the Nighthawk turns the corner and sees me and just freezes. And I said, hi, Mr. Kelly. I put my hand out, I said, I'm Daryl Davis. Yeah, I knew what was up. You know, they're thinking this is an ambush. Mr. Kelly says to me, Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification? I said, sure. So we got into my interview with Mr. Kelly. A little over an hour into this interview, there was kind of a strange noise.
I will speak to this. When I hear his story, it reminds me, I guess let's go to the sexy cam. Oh man. Wait, what's up? Oh no. Gather's looking crazy. Oh, Gather looking kind of crazy right now. Ruh-roh. All right, we'll stay here. Cool, we could do it like this. So, all right. So one of the things that this actually reminded me of, for real, is, do I have to change scenes? I don't think so. All right. So when I was at Penn State, right, I was the president of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, right? And one of the things that you quickly realize is that, yeah, the police are probably going to notice that there's a weed organization on campus. and you know, there was this concern about like, oh, Lord, I'm a black guy running the fucking pro-weed organization at Penn State. But, you know, there really was a cause, right, which was I was sitting in my dorm room crying when I realized that the university that gave me the scholarship was running basically a sting operation on its own students, right? They were basically like using, like, because it'll date myself a little bit, but I went to college like the very first year or so that Facebook was a thing. Like, I went to college when Facebook, not even the public didn't have access to Facebook, and not every college had access to Facebook. Facebook literally started off as like an online extension of a yearbook, and only certain schools had it. But we were one of the ones that did, and there was this whole task force that involved the feds, like the FBI, the state police, the county police, the municipal police department, and the university police. And they were using students to like flip on other students. And what they would do was they would like set up the meets and the parties and the interactions and all that shit on Facebook. And then it was like, gotcha, bitch. And these kids were losing their financial aid. And it was crazy because I had bonded with a group of really cool, like diverse and ambitious students that I was friends with. And, you know, we would get together and smoke every day, like as a, you know, just a way to deal with life, right? And we didn't want to be out there drinking like crazy and all of that. So, you know, we have our little time at the end of the day, and then kick it, have some laughs, and get recharged for the next grind. And you know, I was there on a scholarship, and then I was noticing that these other kids were like losing their financial aid. So it really hit me hard, and I was literally like crying about it. But that's why I started Normal. I was like, I need to change this. So anyway, like I felt that same pull to work with the police department, the campus police department and the local police department, the state college police department. And I remember like the first time I met with the chief of police in state college, who his name is Tom King. He became one of my good allies, somebody I could always do stuff with. But the first time I met him, right, he's like 6 foot something, real big guy, has that look, right, that like receded kind of crowned hair thing that, you know, like he wasn't like a racist who like just beat black people up in his spare time, but he could play one on TV for real. And he had to come up through all the ranks and everything. And, you know, it's just so intimidating walking into that space. And just, I remember little things like being like, I know that he knows that I have all types of contacts with drug dealers. All he has to do is put a little bit of reasonable suspicion to me, and I gave it to him. There were times in my life he could have fucked me over real bad, but he never did. And there was like that real uneasy trust. But the thing I'm trying to get people to understand is, because that was something people thought was great, right? Was that there was this cooperation between us, that because I'd have him come out to speak at events and come to student events, and he would openly talk about our friendship, and people would be like, wow, like this chief of police is literally telling us that he's friends with this black dude who is here to stop his police department from currently doing their job. And he'd be like, oh yeah, me and Jay are great, and we have these wonderful conversations, and we do what we can to help each other, all type of stuff. And I just want people to understand it was like a similar powerlessness. It was a similar fear. This man wasn't my drinking buddy just to be one of my drinking buddies. He wasn't some other student from a different background from a different part of the world who I got to know over, you know, time spent together in the cafeteria trading war stories. He was a man who could ruin my life and not think anything of it. And I had seen his police department ruin the lives of students like me day in and day out. And I felt like the only way I could do my advocacy safely was to be hiding in plain sight. He had to know who I was so he can make an independent decision about me, for better or worse. Literally, I knew, like you're giving it, like imagine, like if I tell you, yeah, I was the president of the weed organization growing up in college, and yeah, I never graduated because I lost my financial aid and scholarship because I had the bright idea to meet with the chief of police, and then he had the bright idea that the easiest way to get rid of this black guy in his pro weed organization is to just make sure that young man catches a charge and doesn't finish his program. Right? Like that would have been so obvious, and y'all be sitting here like, Jay, what the fuck did you think was gonna happen? Right? But this is what I'm showing people, is like we have to roll that dice. And we're not rolling that fucking dice because, we just want to hang out with the other side and kick back and have a couple of beers and let's all get along and be friends. It's like, nah, motherfucker, your people, as people know, could literally like murk me and make up a fucking story and I just be off somewhere, and isn't that tragic? You know, like, so yeah, man, like it's scary. And I just want people to understand that a little bit. All right, let's get back to it.
Automatically, I assumed it to be a threatening noise, an ominous noise. And I knew that Mr. Kelly had made that noise. Almost instantly, I popped up out of my chair, I slammed my hands on the table. My mind is racing 100 miles an hour. I'm hearing the voice that told me, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly, he will kill you. I feared for my life.
Straight up.
At the age of 10, I was one of 2 black kids in the entire area. And we had a march from Lexington to Concord. As I was marching down the street, I began getting hit with bottles, soda pop cans, rocks, and debris from the street. And I did not understand it. I thought I had done something wrong. When I got home, my mom and dad asked me, how did you fall down and get all scraped up? I said, I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what had happened. For the first time in my life, my mom and dad sat me down and explained what racism was to me. But when they told me why I was being hit, I did not believe them. I literally thought they were lying to me. So at the age of 10, I formed a question in my mind. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? I thought, you know what? Who better to ask than someone who would join an organization hating those who do not look like them and who do not believe as they believe.
All right, so for me, gang, I was in 5th grade, right? I went to really awesome, a school called the Aquinas Academy in New Jersey for kindergarten and 1st grade. Fantastic private school. But had some real diversity going on. And then when we moved to Pennsylvania, we moved to the Poconos. I spent 2nd through 4th grade in the Pocono Mountain public school system. I was in the gifted program and stuff like that. It was more diverse as well. Like there was some, a little bit of diversity. So I just don't recall the tension and the drama as much. And I think part of that's the diversity, and I don't mean diversity like it was equal. I just mean I wasn't the only black kid, right? And there was a couple of us or whatever. And also I think the age, like we were all just young. But 5th grade and 6th grade, I went to Our Lady of Mount Carmel School, which is sadly been closed since then, man. That's something to you when they closed the school you went to. One, it makes you feel old, but 2, it kind of feels like a death, like you've lost something from your past just because, it's just not open anymore. But anyway, that was the first school, the first time I was the only black kid in an all-white school. And I remember coming home to my mother crying because there was kids that were so mean to me. I remember it was this really crazy mix of emotions. There was a lot of attention, right? Black people often describe traveling to places like Europe or different parts of the world where people never see a black person. And they describe the interest that everyone takes in them. And most of us will describe it as some sort of like celebrity treatment, right? Like it's super cool because people are just super interested in you. And, you know, it's like everyone's life is changed because they met you, right? And so there was a lot of that, right? There was a lot of being people's first black friend and first black classmate and people being so nice to you. And of course, there's lots of attention from pretty girls. And, you know, that is part of it. And that part has always been kind of weird. You know, nobody minds a lot of positive attention. Most people don't. That's a natural thing to feel good about. But you also recognize that it's like not about you. I would always say I'd had my whole life. I've had avid people in my fan club and avid people who hate me, and a lot of times it's felt like none of it's really had anything to do with me, right? Because it's just a lot of racism and prejudice, and then people who are sort of in my corner just to fight back against the racist, right? So they're on Team J, but they're not necessarily on Team J because they've gotten to know you and they think you're such a wonderful man. They're just on Team J because they know you're dealing with some racist bullshit and they don't like the fact that you got to deal with some racist bullshit. They think it makes the community look bad, which it does. So anyway, like, I remember going home crying to my mom, and I remember for me, I remember talking about like people just talking to me like I should have been able to dunk in like 5th, right grade. There was this sort of expectation for me to have supernatural physical abilities. I remember that. And then all of this talk about cops and stuff like that. And I remember even at that young age being able to verbalize that people expected me to either be some sort of sensational athlete or to grow up to be arrested. And I remember in 5th grade wanting to quit that school. I was there because my mom was concerned about the combination of my social and academic development. As I mentioned, I was previously in a public school. It's a very good public school system as far as I know. But I was in a gifted program. And the gifted program was like limited. Only certain subjects, only certain days of the week. Rest of the time you're in Gen Pop or whatever. And my mom realized I wasn't being challenged enough, and that the school solution was they were going to skip me. Like I would go ahead to like different grade. But my mom didn't want me to be skipped because then I'd be smaller and like socially behind. So that was her motivation to put me in Catholic schools. I think she had always had the ambition of maybe being able to afford private schooling for her own, just the way she got down. But yeah, that was definitely the impetus. And so I wanted to quit, right? Like when I first experienced it, I was like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Like this school's really small. These kids are really weird. It's like they've never seen a black person before. Like everybody's saying all types of crazy shit to me. Like, yeah, I'm definitely not feeling this. And I was crying like, please, Mom, please, like, let me go like to a different school. Like I wanted no parts of this shit. And so people need to keep that in mind. Like when I talk about being the fucking only black kid in an all-white school, people are like, oh, Jay, you were so privileged. Oh, you had it so special. Look at you bragging about your education. I'm like, no, motherfucker, I survived some shit nobody wants to go through. Oh, yeah, they taught me how to read and write real good. Who gives a shit? It was a fucking nightmare. But seriously, like, I wanted out, right? And just like Daryl Davis, my mom sat me down and we had the talk about racism. So it's so crazy to me that they're like, yeah, get rid of them CRT books because these fucking, white kids in high school can't handle hearing about slavery. I'm like, motherfucking black kids at 10 years old can handle understanding, why everybody treating them crazy, why they getting rocks and shit thrown at them. I'm pretty sure y'all can handle a history lesson. And my mom, who, to her credit, is a badass and, was in her own life shattering glass ceilings, being the first person from our family from that side of the family to go to college, and she got her master's degree. And my mom was commuting. Like, my mom was trying to make bucks, so she was trying to, she was trying to live in that Jersey, make money in that Jersey economy, and then spend it in the Poconos economy. Kind of like my future is, I would love to, make dollars, spend pesos, right? You earn a higher income in America, and then hopefully if you could really live that virtual life, you can establish a lifestyle somewhere more affordable. But anyway, like, my mother, it's important to understand this because my mother was dealing kind of with her own version of the same thing. Nobody in my family understood her lived experience, kind of getting an education, moving out of state, moving to the suburbs, like really having to live a total different life. And then she was having to live in a world where she was pretty much like the only black woman in her corporate settings. And she was having to make white friends and deal with glass ceilings and deal with corporate racism and deal with microaggressions and all this type of stuff herself. And so she sat me down at that age and was like, look, like, you have to stay there because this is what the world is like. This is what life is like. You're always going to have to deal with this racism. So if I take you out of this school, I might never stop taking you out of schools. Now, I want y'all to reflect on that and consider how emotionally I could really respond when it's motherfuckers looking at me after I finish grad school and calling me coon on camera in public, or so-called former friends telling me I'm being a drama queen and I'm not really affected by racism. Imagine what a mother is going through, seeing that kind of pain in their child. And genuinely believing that the only greater disservice I could do than taking you away from that pain is to take you away from it. Think about a mother's instinct to protect their child, to make sure their child goes somewhere where they feel safe and happy and they thinking about doing their homework and they come home thinking about doing their homework and they ain't got nothing else to think about but homework and school and girls and playing with their friends and video games. You have a 10-year-old child who at 10 years old has to deal with racism every day, threats of violence. Oh, so-and-so's not allowed to be in the hallway at the same time as you. You're not allowed to go to so-and-so's house. Sorry you're not invited to this party. Adults complaining to your school because you go to that school. Nothing you've done. Literally just the fact that that school had the fucking audacity to let a black kid study there has the whole fucking community up in arms. And you have to tell your child Yeah, I know you're 10 years old and it's way too early in life for you to be dealing with this shit. But yeah, you're gonna have to suck it up, son, because this tough titties. This is really what it's like for black people. So this is what mom goes through every day, and you and I just gonna get through this together. And that's what the fuck we did. Her dealing with racism in corporate America, being the only black woman in her environment, shattering them glass ceilings all the way so she could provide a fucking life for me so that I could get myself the education that she couldn't afford herself, because my mother was gifted too. But since her parents were working class and they some brilliant motherfuckers, it's like, she was the first generation to scratch herself up high enough that she could try to push me up a little bit higher. But recognizing, hey, son, it's going to be a cost. And you're going to have to start paying that cost now. I'm telling y'all, this is the real shit. I don't, and this is the set. Like, I don't even go there. I don't even go there. But all the shit we've been going through in this community lately, yeah, it's time to go there.
Almost instantly, I popped up out of my chair. I slammed my hands on the table. My mind is racing 100 miles an hour. I'm hearing the voice that told me, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. He will kill you. And I'm thinking, what did I just say? What did I just do to cause Mr. Kelly to go off and make some kind of weird noise?
Hell yeah, Maya. I took a bus almost an hour to get to school. Actually, the bus ride was longer than an hour, but it was almost an hour even if you just drove it straight. Hell yeah. People don't know about busing. And good schools wasn't in our backyards. But yeah, even where I lived, even being out of state and everything, I still had to take a bus to get to school, like a very long time. And I dealt with the difference too, because some of the schools like bust kids in just for sports. Like that's a whole thing that was coming up. People think, oh, giving black kids scholarships starts in college. Nah, they be doing that shit in junior high, right? There's certain kids that showed a lot of athletic potential and they were getting bused at different schools. Not my school, but like the junior high that our school fed into. And then I went to a different high school. That also didn't do that, but that was definitely a thing that was going on. I said I always knew my experience of racism wasn't half as bad as my parents, so there was no point complaining about it. Boom, there you go. Because we had, our parents would quickly hit us with the reality of how fortunate we were compared to them. So it's crazy. Every like time we got hit and I'm speaking for Maya like I know, but Maya's my friend. Maya, I appreciate you so much, and just do much love, and just my heart goes out. We've been in on this together, and I gotta say real quickly, it's a minor complaint, but a lot of the way people have been treating Maya has been real fucked up. But like the idea that I speak out against something that's racist, and Maya speaks out and like agrees that it also could potentially be racially problematic. And then people are like, oh, a black man spoke up about something problematic. Oh, did that one black woman we know agree with him? Oh, what are you, like Mrs. Bundy now? Oh yeah, she must be his woman. Yeah, she must just, they must be having, how long you guys been having a little thing here? Like, y'all, really? Black man speaks up on something, black woman agrees. They must be romantically, y'all, that shit is racist. I'ma just I know in everything that's happened, it's a real minor thing, and I'm not at all complaining about being romantically linked with mine. Like I said, when did I win the lottery and how come nobody told me? But that's not cool. But anyway, yeah, Maya, it's like dealing with the generational thing is real, because everything that was so hard for us to deal with, anytime we went to talk to older generations of the family about it, they would like remind you only have to deal with that problem because you're in so much of a better situation than I was. So yeah, that's hard. It's a whole problem in and of itself, because we can't even have our trauma addressed appropriately in our own support networks because it's always being compared to previous eras where the trauma was even more visceral.
I was not armed. My secretary was not armed. I feared for my life. My eyes locked with Roger Kelly's eyes. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My eyes were saying to him, what did you just do? But guess what? His eyes were saying to me, what did you just do? Mary, she's sitting on top of the dresser. She realized what happened. The ice in the bucket next to her melted and the cans of soda fell down the ice. That's what made the noise. And then it made it again, and we all began laughing. We all began laughing at how ignorant we all were. Ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. At the end, I thanked him very much for his time. I shook his hand. He wished me luck. He even gave me his clan card. He said, keep in touch. He and the Nighthawk left. On my way back down the highway to my house, I said to Mary, I said, you know, I rather like Roger Kelly. She said, well, he doesn't like you. I said, yeah, I know. Now understand something. I did not respect what Mr. Kelly had to say. However, I am going to keep in contact with him. I would call him when I had to play a gig up in Frederick, Maryland, or that county, say, hey man, I'm playing, wherever, come on out. He'd come. He'd come down to my house. Now, here's a man who did not like me, who felt that he was superior to me, but yet he would sit at my dining room table and eat with me. Or we would go out and have lunch or dinner. So this went on for a couple of years. He began inviting me to his house. Then he began inviting me to Klan rallies.
The strange relationship of a KKK wizard and his black buddy. They talked and talked some more. Davis learning about the Klan, Kelly learning about Davis.
We get to know one another and we do different things, it hasn't changed my views about the Klan, because my views on the Klan's been pretty much cemented in my mind for years.
I'm sorry, did that hit y'all like Donald Trump when he says, my African American? But that is something we'll get into a little bit. But think about how this man's story plays out, where really the KKK leaders and the Ku Klux Klan are central. It's like, oh, look at them. Isn't it great they got a little black boy they're willing to let run around here. It's just, and I know, again, that these are minor things, but I want people to see it's layers, it's nuance, and even in the way these stories are covered, there is quite often a framing that reflects a problematic perspective.
Over time, that cement that he talked about that held his ideas together in his mind began to get cracks in it. He began questioning some of his thinking based upon the conversations that he had with me. And then over more time, that cement crumbled and fell apart. And then a few years back, guess what? Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan.
I got more respect for that black man than I do you white people. Sometimes we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me. And I'll respect him to sit down and listen to him.
Do you think that you had something to do with Roger Kelly leaving the Klan?
Oh, I know I did. It was an exchange of information that made him rethink his ideology. Daryl Davis. Sorry. My pleasure.
In 2016,
this is interesting.
Documentary Accidental Courtesy, Daryl Davis met with young activists and had a discussion he did not expect.
I would just want to know what the end goal is.
My end goal is to bring people together, okay? Bring white supremacists together with their nemesis. This country is a...
Why I got to get along with them?
Pardon me?
Why I got to get along with them?
We all have to live in this country together, okay? We did.
Infiltrating the Klan ain't freeing your people.
I disagree with you.
I don't see how.
While the discussion lasted more than an hour, it escalated quickly to heated arguments.
All that you talking about these KKK hoods, who gives a I don't give a about you or your KKK hoods. Don't come back here.
I can't talk now?
You can talk, but don't talk that to me.
Sit down and be quiet and let me talk to you.
Get the out of my face.
See how you are? You show your own ignorance, man.
But look, y'all, that's the real. And this is part of the problem. It's sort of like, the beautiful Stephanie Helms has been telling us, you need to speak with oppressed people, not for them. And part of speaking with them is understanding that we don't all have the same thing to say, right? And this is the problem, because somebody will host up Daryl Davis's approach and not recognize the legitimacy of the people who that approach infuriates. Also, the thing that it does that I think is important to be aware of, and this is where I think you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Whew. Yes, there is a value, and we're going to get more into this, but yes, there is a value in changing the, let's say, hearts and minds of problematic people, especially when those problematic people have influence and are potentially dangerous. However, we also have to be incredibly careful about overselling and overemphasizing the effectiveness of that approach. Meaning, how many black people did Daryl Davis interact with? And let's I don't even know the number, but let's say the real number is 30. Let's really catalog how much effort this man has put into this. How much emotional, social, and cost that there's been to him. And then let's also think about how much of a better place is the world because there are 30 less Klansmen. Right? In a way, it's a drop in the bucket. Now, again, I don't have a problem with people who want to focus on putting them goddamn drops in the bucket. Because, like I said, there's the potential to curb or curtail or do damage control with the influence, and to minimize the risk of these people being a threat to anybody going forward. But there's also the risk that everybody who is sitting around cheerleading all of this is now more likely to think, well, this is really what we need. See, I've been thinking this all along. I knew in their heart of hearts most of those Klansmen were good guys, and all it really took was somebody being willing to sit down with them and talk to them politely and explain the problems with racism and explain the issues with Black history. And, you know, they're just a great conversation and a glass of lemonade away from becoming part of the solution. And most of us know that's not the case. I think of this as Daryl Davis is this statistically improbable man who has literally hit the lottery a bunch of times. But for the most part, a lot of us feel when we try to do this, we're just wasting time and effort, and we don't hit the lottery. We don't hit the jackpot. There is no payoff. And a lot of times, it's then used to insist that we continue to discuss and be civil with people who actually have no intention on ever even considering being influenced. Right? They're merely here to have a perfunctory discussion. They're merely here to appear to be civil and debate the topic. They're, merely here to, grandstand about their own victimhood or their own agenda, right? And then a lot of times people are not paying attention to the dynamics that are really playing out because we're all so quick to want to see people having a friendly conversation and then celebrate people having a friendly conversation, even if that fucking friendly conversation doesn't result in a goddamn thing. And as much as that reaction was very visceral, I really appreciate where them brothers were coming from, trying to explain to Daryl Davis, this isn't something that's going to universally be celebrated. Now, part of what I hope that my white fam especially will take away from seeing that interaction is, like I said, that we're not all on the same page. And you do better to go that extra mile to figure out why different people see things differently and then make your choice from there, rather than insisting that because some black man takes one approach that you then can insist that everybody else takes the approach that you like or that makes you the most comfortable. That's incredibly problematic. But beyond just seeing the diversity of opinion within the culture, I want people to understand the limits of that individual-based approach overall, because that's the bigger problem, is mistaking what approach is most effective to change hearts and minds of individuals with what approach may or may not be the most effective to deal with the bigger issue. Putting the onus on the victim. Man, I don't know about everybody, but man, Chad, I love y'all, man. Y'all be getting in here, man. Y'all be responding, man. And the educator in me be warming, getting all the warm and fuzzies inside. Be like, the people listen to me getting it. Hey, man, like the video, subscribe to the channel, man. Share this stuff out there. Hopefully this means this is a good discussion, and hopefully more people will see it. Appreciate y'all.
I know what can be done. I know how people can get along. It bothers me that they can't see that when there are so many examples, or they're not willing to see it. 3 Wednesdays ago, we went out and had dinner.
My name is Daryl Davis, my friend here.
Today was the first time actually Daryl and I ever spent together. The time that I spent with Daryl today, I wish I could have spent with him before sitting down.
This should not have happened, but I'm glad that it did, because had that not happened, we would not be sitting here today. And it proves that dialogue and information can bring people together. Now we all are friends, and they better understand what I do, I better understand what they do, and we've agreed to work together. When I first began interviewing Klan members, they felt I was inferior. I had nothing to offer in terms of my opinion. But then over time, as the relationship develops, slowly but surely they began asking me questions. As a result, active Klan members have renounced that ideology. And in doing so, they turn over their badge of honor, their uniforms, their swastika flags. So thank you.
Gold star carrying, and you don't have to jump for this one. Or using racism to antagonize because you don't like the person, it's still bigotry. That is the thing that I really want people to take away from what we have seen, is that you don't know the hearts and minds of people. It's all we see is your behavior. And when you are willing to use bigotry for your own ends, be it to antagonize a particular person you don't like, or just to, test a group and see who responds, or, be an edgelord in terms of evoking reactions from a crowd. The fact that you have chosen either explicit racism or racial insensitivity as your tool is always bigoted. It's bigoted, it's racist, that's a problem. I used to say this when I was coming up. I always had like, you have positive and negative fantasies, right? I think, or maybe at least if you're wired like I am. Believe it or not, my positive fantasy was to date someone and be invited over to their house for dinner. I know that sounds crazy, but to me, that is what a healthy couple looked like when I was in high school. And that was the part that I saw my peers having that I didn't have. I had this weird thing where a lot of times a young lady that I had a great relationship, say with her older brother or her parents, often we would not date. Part of that was insecurity on my own part. And I really look back at this. This is one of the ways racism affects people, right? I'll always say racism actually interfered with my ability to develop healthy romantic relationships, and it did so because I'm the only black kid. So, I'm gonna be dating white girls for the most part, because I only get to meet other girls when I'm not in school, and right. So then there are the girls you have interest with, or you develop romantic relationships with. If their older brothers and who are in your school and their parents and all this shit are calling the school and don't want you on the hallway, it makes those relationships really unsafe. So, but then if you actually develop like a similar affection and affinity and closeness towards a female, and her family is really accepting of you, you should probably date that person. Like, it got to the point, I'm kicking it so real with y'all that my best friend at one point, shout out, I don't want to mention names because that's a little too close. I don't want people looking her up, but God forbid, I don't know who's out there. But like, her mother was the first person to like sit her down and be like, oh, what's up with you and Jay? And she was like, oh, like, explaining to her mom that like, we're just friends, like, it's not like that, like, we're not dating. And her mother was like, well, you should be. Like, it got to that point with a few of them where the mom was like, no, that's the person. But like, I couldn't, right? Because I couldn't risk, not that I was doing anything super fucked up, but I did know we were young and shit happens and it might not work out, and I couldn't risk losing my support system. So that's what I mean. It's just that extra layer of shit that you have to do, that you have to deal with, and it interferes with your progress and development in ways that people don't often appreciate immediately. Like, it's not just, oh, did people throw rocks at you and call you nigger every day? No, it's I had to be a politician, right? You have to grow up as a politician and make strategic calculations about, hold on, I'm really close to this person. Wait, now we're too close and I can't afford losing it. Like, it was wild. And that's what my mom always said, and people who understand this is you had to deal with adult issues as a child. As a child, you have to learn to contemplate and adjust for things that most children just don't have to consider. All right, let's get back into it. But yeah, crazy.
All of this came through conversation, through talking.
How many members of the KKK have you stopped being members?
Directly, between 40 and 60 people. Indirectly, over 200.
We're not so naive as to think that everybody is
Yes,
going
it
to
does,
church.
Steph.
No.
We don't have the
There will be
numbers,
people
Steph.
who will go to their graves being hateful. But if somebody is willing to sit down and talk with you, there's an opportunity to plant a seed.
Boom. Now, that has to be the sincere test for folks. At least in my opinion, one of the things you have to evaluate when you have the conversation is this person sincerely here for the discussion? Are they here to listen? Are they here to learn? I see something in this community happen all the time. And to me, when it happens, I'm disappointed because I feel like they're playing us. And I feel like we have some real sharp voices in our community who see it happening too. And so they try to call it out. And then, but it's like, look, y'all gotta start to learn who to trust. But I see this thing happen all the time where some problematic person will pop up in a stream about a social issue, whatever it is, and they'll play stupid. They'll literally say, well, I just don't understand. And I'm just, I see a lot of drama and I know this is one of the issues, but I just, I don't understand what's going on, right? And then you'll have a person try to explain it to him. And all of a sudden, they'll start correcting the person trying to explain it to them. Well, no. See what you're missing here is da-da-da-da-da-da. And no, actually, Wait. Are you here to take the class or to teach the class? Because most places ain't gonna be okay with you doing both at the same time. So that's a perfect example of where this whole thing can get weaponized, because you'll have a person who says, well, I'm here to have the conversation, and I'm here because I'm here to learn, and I'm here to hear people out. And then you'll notice, wait, you're not really here to hear people out, right? You can't let you have to check for the consistency. You got to pull somebody's card. You got to check their G. You have to pay attention to the details and see if the details line up. If the details don't line up, then you're going to be a sucker, because you're just going to let a person say it to you. Oh, I'm not racist. Oh, I'm not against da-da-da-da-da. Like, you can't make it that easy for them. So that's an example where this gets frustrating, because we want to reward people for having conversations they're not really having.
If you spend 5 minutes with your worst enemy, you will find something in common.
I had an experience with the Klan. They came to my house. Are you glad this thing's over?
I didn't even call the... This makes sense!
Appreciate you, YouTube punk. All right, we're going to keep this thing rolling for a little bit. Like I said, I'm really, really happy to have some time to actually get in here and do a for real stream with y'all. So this ContraPoints video came out a couple weeks ago, and we're not going to go through the whole thing, but just sort of a section that I've previewed here, and then I'm going to let her roll through the rest of this section, because I heard portions of this and I really, really wanted to respond to it, because it speaks so much of the drama that we've been dealing with in our community. But I didn't do it because I was gonna jump on it and then I didn't, and then so many other people did streams about it, and I was just like, it's just no. But I think it's a good thing to line up now after what I just showed, because I think it's gonna allow me to talk about the section of this that I think speaks to what's going on. So yeah, let's go ahead and roll it, and we'll see how it goes.
I'm not going to argue anymore about whether J.K. Rowling is transphobic, because anyone who believes in transphobia can see that obviously she is. The question now is whether transphobia is the sort of thing that progressives can denounce, the way we at least aspire to denounce racism, misogyny, and homophobia. That's
just quickly, I'm going to change the screens up here a little bit so I can show you guys the gang here and gather. Let's see who's up here. I don't know if anybody... Oh, all right. Steph is here. I don't know if anybody came up on stage, but if you guys are trying to jump in on this, just pop on up to the stage. That'd be cool. But let me just say that a lot of this for me is going to, I'm going to be still reflecting on a lot of what is going on in our community, and specifically with regard to racism. But this was a great video and a great discussion of those dynamics. or similar dynamics, but it's primarily focused on the issue of trans, because it's dealing with J.K. Rowling. And I obviously am in agreement with the take-home message of this video with regard to those issues. But I don't want this to be seen as I'm sort of changing subjects from Daryl Davis to J.K. Rowling. No, I'm still trying to identify this problem, but I think the problem also happens in discussions about trans issues, where we have these conversations and discussions about what people consider controversial political topics or social issues, and in effect, we're enabling a lot of problematic behavior by insisting that the solution is that oppressed and marginalized people have friendly heart-to-heart discussions and powwows with bigots. And again, just to be clear, because I know people have come and gone or maybe not been here the entire time, but the title of today's stream is The Daryl Davis Problem, and I want to make it clear I don't actually have a problem with Daryl Davis. This, like so many issues, is something that within, like, you know, groups that are marginalized, so in this case, say, like, Black people, from my perspective, I value the different perspectives. One thing I loved about the Daryl Davis piece we just watched was, even though they came to this common understanding, you know, those dudes expressed, nah, bro, we ain't down with that being friends with the Klan shit, you know? And here's exactly why. It ain't doing nothing for us. And, you know, he has his approach, and I'm good with that. What I'm not good with is men like them being silenced by the example of Daryl Davis, right? And that's what I want to address here. And so yeah, but yeah, so I just want to make that clear, because when I saw this, I was like, oh, this video is fantastic. But that was another reason I thought it was best not to get in there, because I didn't want to take it in a different direction at that time. But I think there's been enough distance now that I can say, hey, this ContraPoints video, we could use as a starting point for a discussion about some other things that we've been dealing with.
That's usually what we're talking about when we talk about J.K. Rowling.
Right. So why did I say that? Because you can insert J.K. Rowling with all these fucking racist dog whistlers in our community. We don't need to get into all the specifics, but the same way that she started with this, like, I'm not going to sit here and debate whether or not J.K. Rowling is transphobic, because if you're anywhat aware of the situation, I think there's been enough to establish that this particular person has, in fact, you know, demonstrated transphobic behavior, and we can just move on with that conclusion. And I'm the same way, and it's because of some of the points that the chat has been bringing up so wonderfully, which is people doing stuff that's problematic and putting the onus on the victim, people using, you know, bigotry to antagonize or trigger people, and then we'll say, well, oh, it's just because I don't like this particular person. Oh, it's just because I'm insensitive, and I just don't care that I'm insensitive. And yeah, I know I called you a coon 3 times on air, but yeah, that whole me using a raccoon and then a black guy, I had no choice. That was just an inevitable part of my avatar sequencer. And you know these avatar sequencers, there's no way you can. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm where she's at. We're just gonna knock on wood. We're just gonna throw that whole thing in the bin. We're gonna class all those people together. Right? I'm not interested. I'm so not interested. And let's move on now to how this relates to the larger issues at play.
Rowling, right? Whether it's fair to cancel her That's what the witch trials of J.K. Rowling is about. The Rowling debate is a proxy for a larger question. Is transphobia a legitimate viewpoint worthy of polite consideration and respect in liberal humane society? Or is it just an ugly prejudice that we can justifiably react to with scorn and condemnation?
Oh, God damn it, Stephanie Helms is in the house, and you never know when things are going to go to the next level as a result. Bigotry is bigotry. The thing with trans stuff is that those of us with passing privilege get to hear the worst of the garbage, and if we don't push back, we're just in another closet, Natalie. Now, I got a challenge from my home girl, Maya. Maya, let me know if you disagree with what I'm about to say, but there's another dynamic at play that I think might be real interesting for those that care. And that is, there is a awareness often within groups, in this case, people of color, Black people, of which people in the group get to be associated with the privileged or majority people the most. And in some cases, that might play out through something like passing privilege, for instance, right? You get to hear the worst of it because you pass, and people don't think that there's anyone in the room, and so shit flies, and hey, have you ever met a trans person? Well, you have now, kind of thing, as Stephanie would do. But sometimes it's just an issue of proximity, and here's where this gets interesting. So some of you may remember I did an interview with the Nordic Black not too long ago. And one of the things that he was saying is from, his neck of the woods in YouTube, I've had a lot of benefit and privilege of sort of, for lack of a better way of putting it, being a Black guy within the majority atheist YouTube community rather than a content creator emerging from the Black atheist community, for instance, whatever that means, right? And so the issue isn't passing, but it's proximity. And I think for people like myself, and I imagine Maya and other people who, this is just part of our lived experience, and that's the part Maya can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've gotten used to this proximity just as it's just a part of our lives. It's just who we are. And we've also gotten used to being judged by other Black folk for being in those spaces. And so that's just a thing. And I want people to realize that that's a thing. And it might be a thing for people like me and Maya. We might have a thing where that's how other Black people see us, and that's something we're conscious of when we look in the mirror. Now, where does that lead to? It leads to an expectation that if there is potentially problematic behavior or things going on, that we will speak to it. Because if we do not, and other people observe that these things are happening around us, and observe that we did not say or do anything about it, we will be judged very harshly for that too. And we can be called some very inappropriate names, or let's say very unpleasant names ourselves. People would feel appropriate at that time, right? And so, it's just another layer of expectations for people to consider when these things go on. Yes. Yeah, like using the privilege of our friends for our own benefit. Yeah. And it's, yeah, pretty much, yeah. And then the related idea that if we then are silent on, you know, bigotry or racism, that there's that extra, you know, layer of, well, you were in a position to do something about it. You are close to them. You can have the conversation with me. Yeah, I noticed it, but I'm not friends with any of those people. Right, so there's kind of that thing, and you know, whatever. I just want people to understand that that's a thing we deal with, and it's certainly a thing I feel, and I think it comes, at least for me, you do feel a sense of responsibility because you are in proximity to people who may care, and you speaking up and pointing things out may have an influence on them. Now, I don't necessarily think that it's okay for people to demand that of anyone. But again, when I speak to a lot of these situations and these social dynamics, I'm not talking about how anybody wants things to be. I'm talking about my understanding of the way things are.
And there's an even broader question here about whether we can justifiably react to anything with scorn and condemnation. Is canceling ever warranted? Is it right to condemn racism, homophobia, and misogyny? Or should we allow spokespeople for these prejudices a respected position in the free marketplace of ideas, where we can all sit around debating the legitimacy of gay marriage or the possible merits of a white ethno-state? Is the final solution a myth promulgated by the international Jew? Are yoga pants to blame for sexual violence? Wouldn't the taxpayer save a lot of money if there weren't so many disabled people? Who knows? These are open questions. Let's sit down with people on both sides, on many sides, and have calm, civil conversations about it for the rest of our goddamn lives. Chapter 5, Debate. Sorry.
Yeah, so I like that because I just thought that was a great lead-in. But this is the chapter of this video that we're gonna focus on. But that was a great staging for it, and that's my frustration. This idea that we need to sit around and continue to have conversations about issues that, to me, we just don't debate. And the feeling lately, guys, has literally been flat Earth. Right? It has literally been the idea that, like, just same way you guys sit around and you hear these flat Earth debates or these young Earth debates, and you're just like, part of the issue is that we're pretending that there's a credible, you know, other side to this. It is wild when you hear and see the same debate tactics brought out, as though it's now on me to sit around and have a reasoned philosophical discussion about bigotry. And it's been a disappointment in a sense, because I'm like not with this. I'm telling you, I'm like, this is not, I'm like, nope. But there's an opportunity, and the opportunity is to, for me, it's been to recognize that this is like a side effect, at least for some of us, of the culture that we're in, right? Like, there's a certain form and meta and language of the channels that we hang out in, and the type of content that's on those channels, and the type of behavior that results as of the fact that, well, typically we are debating things, and typically we're celebrating the fact that everything is up for discussion. And, well, typically we're here to create a space for people who strongly disagree with each other to sit down and have a reasoned discussion about it. And so there's an opportunity for me there too, right? To not take it quite so personally, meaning it doesn't mean it's going to hurt any less or be any less disappointing to me personally, but it just means that I have two problems to deal with, right? I have to deal with the fact that there's just this sort of cultural issue here that we're dealing with in our community, and then at the same time, there's also a lot of personal disrespect that's been headed my way as a result of it. And it's not that I'm not familiar with racism and that I don't have thick enough skin to handle it. It's just there are certain places where I enjoy not dealing with it. It's not a good time, right? And I genuinely mean this, and I'm beginning, like so many other things, to really appreciate the perspective of other people in our community. But I'm thinking of Steph again. Part of it's I'm looking at Stephanie because in front of me in the gather screen. But that thing, right, Steph, that I didn't sign up for this. That you know, we have all these other conversations that brought me to this community, and then things turn to these issues, and you know, I'm happy to have eyeballs and screens and asses in seats. You know, when we're on the screen, but genuinely would prefer to be talking about something else. But again, there's the flip opportunity, right? Which is apparently now is the time when these things are happening in our community, when they are the issue of the day. And so opportunities come when they come, not when you're ready for them or not when you ask for them. So we're gonna see what we get out of this. But yeah, let's get into this chapter, and I'm excited, man. It's been fun streaming with you guys, and appreciate the vibe, and good to see some new names and faces here, and we'll see how this goes.
I know I did this look before, and it's like not related to the video topic at all, but it just makes me feel sliving. The boy who slived. So Megan Phelps Roper's viewpoint seems to be that scorn and condemnation are never appropriate, that we should approach every conflict with empathy and compassion, even when dealing with the worst, most destructive people in the world.
Hi, my name is Megan, and my heretical belief is that even the people who seem to be the worst, most destructive people in the world are human beings who deserve compassion and empathy if we want to find a way to change their minds.
In her book, in her TED Talk, in her public appearances, Megan expresses the idea that society has recently become polarized in some unprecedented way, that we've all become extremists, that in some sense, we've all become the Westboro Baptist Church.
I can't help but see in our public discourse so many of the same destructive impulses that ruled my former church.
She identifies things like certainty, vilification of compromise, us versus them thinking, suppression of empathy, and celebration of death and misfortune as Westboro-like elements in public discourse. And this really bothers Megan, because she claims that a decade ago, when she went on Twitter to tweet about how marriage is abominable to God, it was people who engaged her in a civil, rational way that eventually led her to renouncing Westboro's ideology. And I don't entirely disagree with Megan about this. She's totally right that if you want to change people's minds, then approaching them with compassion and empathy is usually the best way to do that. But Megan reaches another conclusion that I don't agree with, which is that because compassion and civil conversation are most likely to persuade people, we should never cancel anyone, even the most horrible bigots. And canceling is a pretty meaningless term at this point, but what Megan means is we shouldn't say mean things to bigots. We shouldn't boycott or counter-protest or raise our voices. We shouldn't shun or exclude anyone, because that's just not how you change minds. And I get why Megan thinks this, right? De-radicalization was a really important part of her life experience. She's also clearly holding out hope that other members of her family will leave Westboro and have a life on the outside. She has a quote from her mom in her Twitter bio. The last lines of her book address her family. "I want to tell them that I love them. I'll just have to find another way." This is touching and human and also kind of a conflict of interest. The problem is, Megan's views about this only make sense if you assume that Megan is the main character of reality. If you assume that the moral improvement of bigots is more important than protecting the people they target. Or if you assume that changing bigots' minds is the only way to make social progress. Which it isn't. As far as I know, Anita Bryant is 83 years old, and she's still homophobic. But even without Anita's blessing, gay rights have still somehow managed to progress since the 1970s, because gay activists didn't need to persuade Anita Bryant. They needed to defeat her, and that's what they did. We have to accept that realistically, persuading all the bigots is just not an option. Yes, we should convince as many people as possible, but there will always be bigots. And mocking them, shaming them, or boycotting them is, I think, a perfectly valid strategy. Does that mean that when we cancel bigots, we're acting kind of like the Westboro Baptist Church? Nar. You would only think that if you're...
I mean, to the extent, right, this is one of those things where it's like, am I also acting like the Westboro Baptist Church when I eat, drink water, and take a shit? This is another part of the debate culture that we so problematically find ourselves in all the time, because it allows for people to say, well, you know, isn't this just us versus them thinking, you know, you guys are just creating an echo chamber. You know, you may even find yourself and your friends called a pit of vipers, you know, simply because you're not willing to be intolerant of what you feel is bigoted behavior. The thing for me that I wanted to touch on, because I think it's important to start from our community and branch out into the bigger world with the issues, so that we can see how what goes on in our small little neck of the woods is a reflection of issues that we're trying to get a grip on in wider society. And then I think it's important that we take the return journey and go from the wider issues in society right back down to what's going on in our backyard, because now understanding how we might fit into the bigger picture, we need to act locally within the sphere that we have influence, okay? And this example here, where you have someone who's leaving a group and, you know, takes this particular approach to de-radicalization, is a really important point, as is the issue of perspective. You know, assuming that this particular person is the star of the show. I think in our communities are really important, because so much participation in our community is associated with strong ideology and strong feelings and strong identities. So you have people who are literally here to defend their religion, and sometimes, or a community that is used to engaging with people who are defending their religion. Oftentimes, we are former members of high demand groups, if not cults ourselves. And so there's a natural, I think, aversion to high demand thinking, and a natural aversion to make sure that you aren't just going along with the groupthink and doing what is being asked of you to stay in social harmony with your friends and your community. And I think it's awesome that we're more mindful of that than we were coming up. And I feel that myself. And I've just been trying to grow to maybe a different space in my journey, where I'm rediscovering the need for a strong identity, for strong boundaries, for a strong sense of purpose about what I'm about and what I'm not about, what I'll tolerate, what I won't tolerate, what issues I'm willing to show up and die on that hill and, you know, maybe be at the tip of the spear on issues that are important to me, even if that issue doesn't put me at the tip of the spear, versus things where I'm just going to say, sorry, that's just not my fight today. And so part of that is the reconstructing, right? And so to me, part of deconstructing was the aversion to strong responses and that. And I feel like this is now different. This is about reconstructing, finding people who are like-minded in a way, and working cooperatively with them to try to understand you know, how we can organize ourselves and be more effective. So I just want to express, I want to do my best to express compassion and empathy for people who it really is hard to figure out which way to go on things and how to have certain conversations and how much of those conversations to have. I do sincerely appreciate that. Stephanie, you're here. Can you hear me? Did you pop on stage? Yeah, awesome.
I think I'm on the stage, aren't I?
All right. Yeah. My YouTube is acting a little bit funny. Oh, thanks, Lena. Thank you so much. All right, Steph, where are you at on this?
Well, I think I've seen Natalie's stream.
Yes, you have probably 5 times.
I've seen Natalie's stream a few times. Might be interesting. If you might be interested to know that she posted on Twitter today that she's, you know, after this last, she's basically shifting gears on her channel and not going after these issues again in quite so much depth.
Interesting.
Just because, I mean, Natalie always produces unbelievably quality product as far as, you know, production values and everything else. And this particular last one was pretty carefully researched. And this segment that you're going over is really interesting because this was exactly the thing. She was interacting with this person from Westboro Baptist Church in good faith, and it sort of went sideways a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, these issues aren't hard. I did are hard. I don't want to derail a conversation too much, but I did a. I don't know if people have seen Sabine Hassenfelder's just asking questions video particularly on trans kids, but she's sort of caught up in this Jesse Singal, Jonathan Chait, just asking questions thing where like the data about trans people isn't good enough because there are no double-blind control group studies. And I spent a good deal of time saying why, in the case of trans people, you can't do a double-blind control group study.
Right.
Because the harm done is far, far worse. You can't give someone a placebo. You've already identified the group.
Yeah.
And that needs treatment. So I'm not sure how you can. You can't.
Right.
I mean, the New England Journal of Medicine published a paper that I went through on that video saying this is absurd. You can't do that.
Right.
And if you take, if your standards are the standards of a physicist, where there aren't human beings involved, then sure, that's
Yes,
cool.
so this was the topic of your
Human
stream.
beings aren't particles;
Yeah,
they're human beings, and
absolutely.
And medical care is not. For example, it's wicked hard to do a double-blind study for any sort of surgery.
Right.
Because the surgeon's gonna know, right?
Right.
You're gonna have the ideal double-blind study is like nobody knows
Right.
who's getting what and what is, what are these things. But you give surgery leaves scars, involves a bunch of people. So it's how do you do that kind of double blind?
Yes.
Another example that particularly since this paper came out, and I am derailing. This paper came out in 1991, and AIDS was a big thing when you're trying to find the cocktails that would tamp down AIDS medications. And how do you double blind for that when you know that there's no therapy at all available?
Right.
So are you going to give a group that's been diagnosed with a debilitative and ultimately fatal illness, are you going to give them a placebo and watch them die when there's a possibility that they won't? You can't ethically do stuff like that, and that's what Sabine didn't understand. And it sort of ties into what Natalie's going to get into, and to what you've been speaking to.
Absolutely.
How do you do the least amount of harm?
Yes, and that's the issue here is and this is the thing where I think our community can sink into this is that's a debate point. Right? That is what you bring up if you are trying to critique somebody's argument to win a debate. But when you are talking about the issue in this case of the necessity of medical care for our trans community, to me, it is a form of bigotry itself to insist that this is a genuine thought stopper, or as though somehow we should change our course of action because there's been no double-blind study. It's you have to have a certain level of insensitivity to go there. And you have to have a certain level of denseness to not recognize when someone's gone there.
Jay, you spoke of your own experience early, in your youth, growing up in schools and blah blah blah. Well, how do you do a double-blind study as to whether it is more effective to desegregate schools or keep schools separate but equal? How do you do that double-blind study? I mean, it's basically, well, we'll just keep on doing what we've been doing since the end of Reconstruction and keeping Jim Crow laws in effect, and we'll have a test. We'll see how it works out here. We will see how it works out there, and then we'll make a rational decision. Well, you won't, because these aren't rational states.
Absolutely.
This isn't a rational debate, really. It's a question of, are you going to treat people as if they are human beings, or are you going to treat them as if they are a class of human beings that must be controlled in some way?
Yes. And it's also,
and that's bigotry. That's prejudice. That's the fruit
100%
of all of the signifying that goes on.
100%.
And it's not harmless. It's not just fun. It's not just fun and games.
And what just came to mind is the Kent Hovind debate, where I tried to make 2 points, which
they're what I do, right? So I tried to do what I do as a unique approach to debating Ken Hovind and let everybody else do what they do. But it was number one, evolution is the most well evidence theory in the history of biology. And so if you're going to say that we shouldn't teach it, what is your scientific alternative and what is the evidence for it? That's question number one, right? Do you want to tell us what's the alternative and what is your evidence for it? And number two, it was to make it clear that the courts have decided that this sort of mix we're getting here doesn't pass the muster, and it's unconstitutional to even teach it because it violates the separation of church and state. Now, where am I going with that? I think that is the same thing that happens when people have that conversation. Because similarly, you wouldn't say, well, what's the double-blind study for the origin of species? Or what's the double-blind study for the cosmological constants or whatever, right? It would be nonsensical. Meanwhile, all the evidence is clear. The best of the available sciences we do have, be it the biology, the psychology, studying the sociological impact, the economic impact, be it the chemistry, whatever it is, right? The evidence is all, it's the same thing you say in sports. Like, we've done this, the International Olympic Community has dealt with this, we've got documents and everything. Why doesn't anybody ever bother to ask? And so you are starting this statement, in this case, there's different a double-blind study or whatever the talking point might be in a race conversation, as though this is the beginning of fruitful research, rather than a nonsense question trying to address an issue that all the research has already shown. Yeah, treating these people leads to the best outcomes. Yes, we can address this. Yep, we figured out a long time ago it's unethical not to treat people. Yep, once in a while, things don't turn out quite well, but it's right now it's lower than the risk of regretting knee surgery, so we're going to call that acceptable and keep it two-stepping. And so that's what I mean about the tactic involved, because that's what it feels like for us. It feels like having a flat earth debate about your humanity, right? And you're like, why? I'm not only baffled that I have an opponent apparently in this debate I didn't think would have to be a debate at this point, but apparently we've got an audience that is looking to see how this turns out. Like, what? What is happening right now? And then again, what's their alternative? What is their suggestion here? Is their suggestion that we shouldn't intervene? And what evidence do we have to support that right? In other words, they're literally just trying to reestablish the problem, although it's a fucking alternative solution. Like, literally, fine, if you want to bring up that there's no double-blind study, great. Just show me the double-blind study that shows that we shouldn't give people gender-affirming care. I'll wait. Right? Of course, because there's nothing. What they're really doing is it's back to the ideology, right? And that's where, again, to me, we've already settled this. We've already created protected classes. We just need to remind ourselves that we've already determined that we're going to protect this class of individuals.
Well, that's the thing. You can't be shown a double-blind study, because to do that study would be medically unethical.
100%.
So what that effectively means is, well, if we can't have a double-blind study, then we shouldn't be offering proven effective medical care.
Right, exactly. That's such a concise
and so
way
where
to
does
put
that
it.
leave you? At that point, it leaves you bereft of the possibility of addressing the problems at issue.
Right. But you have to pretend that we don't have.
And then so what? It's basically, wait for a more convenient season.
Yes.
Which is the focus of the letter from the Birmingham jail.
Right.
It's, why aren't you patient? Why can't you wait? And it's particularly galling in this instance because we have had that season of improvement in understanding and addressing trans problems for a good long time. There's been evolution in the medical profession from the DSM-3 to the DSM-5 in the mental health field, and in standards of care on the doctor-patient side all the way through for over the course of 30 years. And what's happened is that as a result of that, people have felt more comfortable in their identity, in their knowing that their experience of being human is not crazy, and there's more acceptance. And all of a sudden it's, oh, well, you're too visible, go away, please, because I'm afraid for my crotch. It's like, what are you talking about? It's not our problem, it's their problem.
Absolutely.
It's they're operating from a position of irrationality and emotion that's unjustifiable. It's based on preconceptions as to what gender is, what a man is, what a woman is, and it's effective because it appeals to the for people who haven't analyzed the question either through personal experience or study. It's very, very hard for people to understand.
Yeah, and that's where you can get sucked into the talking points if you're not careful.
Right.
Especially around here. And again, you have to ignore the proven medicine. And that's what's so frustrating to me. And I feel the same way about racism, where in reality, we're living in a time where we're supposed to be all holding hands in having disagreements, but respectful disagreements about how to solve the problems, not continuing to debate, is racism actually a problem, right? And that's the thing. So yeah, let's go ahead and see what she's got. I'm so happy you're here, though, Steph. And anybody else, y'all are welcome to jump in here.
Great, I can go refresh my tea.
You're a total moral relativist. I guess controversial opinion, but bigotry is shameful, and it should be shamed. I'll say it. If you're testing out some racist ideas in your head, you might feel afraid to express them publicly for fear of being shamed or judged. Is that because we live in an Orwellian dystopia that punishes people for wrongthink? No, it's because racism is dangerous and shameful, and you should be ashamed of it, and the people judging you are right to do so. And sure, there are some very patient people who devote their lives to de-radicalizing bigots, which I think is a perfectly noble thing to do. There's a guy named Daryl Davis who's befriended members of the Ku Klux Klan for over 30 years, and he claims he's convinced more than 200 of them to leave. And good for him. De-radicalization is a valid strategy, but it cannot be the only strategy, and it must not be the primary strategy. Because we're not going to defeat racism by telling black people to be a little nicer to racists. Feminists would be wasting their time trying to convince Andrew Tate to respect women. In general, I think that the massive effort that it takes to maybe persuade bigots is better spent persuading other people not to listen to them. And it's also—
And this is dead on. I didn't actually know that she brings up Daryl Davis in this, but I'm glad we sequenced this the way we did. But yeah, and that's the problem here. Is it's fine to celebrate Daryl Davis's ability to I don't even know. I want there to be like a word. It's like collecting scalps, but it's not. It's like collecting Klan hoods for de-hooding over 200 Klansmen. I mean, come on. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind somebody giving the damn man a Nobel Peace Prize for that shit. But it can't be the norm. And the other thing is, you have to recognize what an extraordinary effort that is. And so it's unreasonable to expect most people to do that. And also, it's it's dehumanizing to demand it of them, because at the end of the day, Daryl Davis is of his own volition essentially choosing to submit himself to socialization within a hierarchy of people who hate him and could potentially be very dangerous to him in order to negotiate his humanity. And I almost would take it a step further than she's at least taken it to this point. And to me, as a Black person, it's shameful that white people celebrate a Black man, you know, sitting across the table to, you know, anti-radicalize Klans people, rather than raising the social consciousness of the average white American to the point that they, from a privileged and much more assuredly safe and, given the majority, much more assuredly impactful position, do the relatively easy and not extraordinary work of having meaningful discussions about racism with people in their social circle, their family and friends, and certainly also for not drawing harsher boundaries around problematic racial behavior. So the fact that we're at this place where not only is it still publicly and socially acceptable for people to hold these problematic views, it's applauded for everyone to sit around and watch oppressed people dialogue with their oppressors so that the rest of the oppressed class doesn't have to do shit about it. And then using that example to chastise and critique other oppressed people who don't want to be in the same fucking vicinity as these motherfuckers. Because, I don't know, they have a history of, like, trying to kill us and shit. And again, I'm happy that people are like, yo, let's do something about the laws that are trying to end trans people, because that's what they said they're trying to do, and I fucking believe them. But these same people are continuously trying to pass laws and deny the rights of Black people as well. So again, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and recognize that in both of these cases, we don't have the numbers. So we need the people who have, I would rather people raise their willingness to have a conversation with their bigoted uncle than them give Daryl Davis his flowers for sitting down with Klansmen. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, yeah, I think that, you know, that in an earlier conversation I was having, I wasn't really in the conversation. I was sort of watching the conversation happen. Somebody said, yeah, well, you know, I have a neighbor who's really, really bigoted, really, really racist, super, super Trump voter. And it was in the context of, well, you know, you want to be able to give people charity. And it's like, well, comes a point where you might be better advised to draw a line on your charity, to say that your charity can only extend so far, and that if you're being charitable to either forge or extend a friendship, that the level of retrograde ideas might be a barrier to any progress in that way, right? In other words, somebody says, "Oh well, I think these people shouldn't be able to use these facilities. I don't think these people ought to, whatever people." And believe me, the conversation now about trans people is very similar to the conversations around segregation in lots of respects, except that trans people are not all that identifiable, really. And, it's like, it's a little, there are nuances there. But if you're willing to extend charity and not draw a line and say, look, I can't go beyond, if you want to keep having these conversations, then I would ask you to examine where these ideas that you hold are coming from, and do the hard work, because it is hard work. It's hard work to deconstruct your own racism. It's pretty fucking hard work, because it's a thing that is as natural as as mother's milk when you're fed racism with your mother's milk, or you're fed bigotry with your mother's milk, and you grow up in a culture that says, yeah, this is the way it is. It's hard to deconstruct that upbringing, hard to realize, well, where did these ideas come from? Why are they such a big, why do I rely on them as part of my, why do I cling to them as part of my personality? And where do you get off? I mean, it's one thing to be like Mel Brooks and punch down. It's another thing, and punch up. It's another thing entirely to punch down.
Absolutely. And that's that's really important. Part of what I was thinking about with this too is when I started to notice the vibes, and once in a while it was people actually mentioning Daryl Davis, but then other times it was people just sort of saying things that were very reminiscent of that sort of ethos. And I remember thinking that a huge difference is the work. And yeah, it does touch on something I mentioned earlier, but I'll say it again. There's a difference. Like, I always think of this as like war. Like when you're at war, somebody's got to negotiate the peace treaty, right? But the fact that the officers from each side get into a room and sit down at a table, have a smoke and a cup of coffee, and maybe or maybe not negotiate a peace treaty, and everybody goes home safely, and they'll give it a go next time, and there might be a series of this, right? It's not that they're just sitting around smoking, drinking coffee to talk about their wives and become golf buddies. There's work that needs to be done, and in some cases this is life or death work. And so we celebrate the peaceful means at peacemaking, right? When you recognize there's a war going on, and then recognize people who are willing to put themselves in harm's way to be part of the peacekeeping mission, that is totally different than just saying, hey, I'm gonna go hang out at the strip club and slap a few asses with the enemy. Hope you don't mind. Yeah, I do mind. And
well, that's the difference. I mean, you can't. You walk into the thing. It's like, hey, here's the thing. I think you're full of shit. I going to the KKK and hanging out. It's kind of, well, those people might be reachable because they haven't taken you out and lynched you, but you're putting yourself in harm's way doing that kind of thing, for sure. It's like trans girl goes to a biker bar and starts singing karaoke. It's like, well, which I've done, you know.
Yeah. And there's a difference between these things. And let's get into the details on how these things play out in our community, because I actually think it's important, and I don't want to forget to touch on it. And one of the examples I'm thinking of in here, because it's always felt relevant to me in all this, is the example of me playing drums in a church as an atheist, which is an example that has come up recently. We'll put it that way. And to me, that was part of the real difference there. As I said, I played drums at their church. I don't. To me, that's the difference between using my platform to promote somebody else's, to promote an ideology I don't agree with, is very different than, again, doing the work of going into their space and being willing to serve as part of the effort to have the broader conversation. And it relates to all this because it came from a very similar place. As far as being a musician is concerned, not that, we've always had these conversations, so I don't expect people to necessarily know this, but I actually swore off playing at a church a couple years before I started playing at that church. And I had done it for a while as an atheist, but I didn't always feel great about it, and I had churches screw me over in terms of money. And so I just decided that chapter of my musical career was over. And certainly I didn't expect to ever volunteer at a church again. But I literally did it out of this same feeling of feeling very frustrated with the fact that I didn't see enough students that I thought were from, creationist or traditional religious backgrounds in the classroom. And really feeling like we can't have this "if you build it, they will come" mentality when you're in a minority, weakened position, and you have this other pressure on students that is coming from their family and their peer group, and they're being brought up in it. I'm like our opposition is too organized, too powerful, too actively a part of people's lives for us to just sit back and say, well, when they get here, we'll just teach them great science and that ought to take care of it, because you're not recognizing that everything working against them even making that step, right? And also not recognizing that we're losing this. That their way is more powerful than ours. Their way works better. And if it comes to, we do what we do here and they do what they do there, game over. They just give up now. Game over. Because the kids are not going to give up their fate to take a theory, right? So it was that same sense of, okay, this could be different, right? This could be a thing. If I'm honest with them, if I let them know what's up, and I tell them, hey, look, I'm always gonna be respectful. If you're looking for a worship drummer, you'll get a worship drummer. And I appreciate the opportunity to be myself and have these conversations and not be rejected by this community. If in the meantime we can hold hands on being a positive influence in the life of students, and I get to, interact with my students out of class, that was always a big part of it. And, we're going to do some cool stuff in the community, like for the school and all of this type of stuff. Hey, awesome. We can hold hands on the community service aspects of all this. But again, it was about the work. So I hope that that's something I can share with this channel. I always think that this channel will grow a lot more, and that I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot, because my name's Pocket Locker for a reason. I'm actually a drummer. And if you guys saw me playing drums, I think there'd be a lot of vibe and excitement about the channel that we don't have right now. But setting that aside, one of the things people always notice preparing for that is you're volunteering. You're doing something that you're not getting paid to do. You're not getting rewarded professionally for doing. Yes, I do have some advisors that are conscientious of how it fits into sort of philosophy of science and STEM education, but I'm not gonna get a job because of it, right? It's more like that's cute and good luck with that type of deal. Way to take one for the team type of situation. But it's a lot of work to put in the effort it takes to play at the what I consider professional standard that I want them to get on drums from me. In that case, it was twice a week. I always laugh. Everybody wants to be the drummer on Sunday morning on stage when it's fun and everybody's standing first, but I'm the drummer for this church 7 goddamn days a week. And that just referred to the amount of time I had to put in practicing, right? And then again, the work, you have to go beyond that, right? Because if I was just there to show up and play drums and be cool and be popular and watch games with the guys, then it'd be it, right? So you have to make sure you're taking that extra step, which is to make sure you're having lunch with the pastor so you can talk to him about what's going on in the community and really have that heart-to-heart about evolution and STEM education and having those conversations with the members of your Bible study group, which you got to be in the Bible study group, because if you're there to build relationships, you don't build relationships in worship service on a stage on Sunday morning, right? You build relationships participating in the Bible study group. You build relationships going on trips. You build relationships doing all that other stuff. So you got to not just put in the work and time to be a great drummer for them. You got to put in the work and the time to do all the actual relationship building, which is actually like full-blown participation in their group. And then you got to make sure you take those opportunities to have those tough conversations and address the apologetics and, maintain the virtual conversations even throughout the pandemic and all of that stuff. And so I just want people to be aware, like, that's the difference of if you're going to say you're doing this because you're on mission. And then all those details matters. It matters that you're in their space with them putting you on a platform, not you putting them on a platform. And if you are going to put them on a platform, to be transparent and to be critical, which is why, if you see me do something about my mom's church, like we did for members only, I'm being very critical of it. I think about even Kent Hovind, right? Yes, I try to make the debate with Kent Hovind a surprisingly pleasant experience, mostly so that it'd be somewhat more useful to me down the road as a potential educational thing, and also so that I could honor the wishes of the host to not turn it into a dumpster fire. But all of that under the guise of knowing I'm this person's opponent, and I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna fucking hit him with some real serious opposition. and that's what I'm here to do. Now, if all people took away was, well, you guys smiled and shook hands at the end of it, then that's all you took away. But to me, there's, again, a real difference between going in their spaces as that person's opponent to do the work of opposing them, which is why you don't see Kent Hovind popping up on our channel just here to chop it up over some videos and discuss the merits of creationism, right? There's just a difference. And it's the same thing with, the death of Jerry Springer recently is another great opportunity to talk about this, because yes, a lot of people, he had some progressive stances on some things or whatever, but a lot of people critique him, and the critique is, it was just a bunch of madness that seemed to, be a ratings giant, put a lot of asses and seats and eyeballs on screens. But it was very light to non-existent in terms of the criticalness in trying to make sure something productive came of all of that.
My objection to Springer was that a lot of the eyeballs on screens and asses in seats came at the expense of the people who
100%.
were guests on
Yes.
the program.
Right.
So it was parading people, putting people in situations that were
At their lowest.
they agreed to it. Yeah, they knew what they were getting into, but they often walked away quite damaged by the experience. And
nobody knows what they're getting into. That's a myth.
like, okay, let's have
Yeah.
let's have a show where we tear the wings off of flies and call it fun, and the audience sits there and whoops and hollers like a bunch of grade school boys and thinks it's all a big fucking joke, and it's not. You know?
Exactly. And let me be clear about what I mean by nobody can know what they're getting into. Like, you might sign up and you know of this show, and you might think that, there's, some value in this experience. Some people, I think, genuinely believe this was an opportunity to get some damn conflict resolution with whatever they were dealing with. But what I mean by nobody knows is there's no way to prepare for that impact. And it's not like there's a follow-up reality show that is taking you to the 3 to 5 years later of what's happening to the guests of the show, so that you have more of a informed disclosure on what the real, down the line consequences might be. But also, I just think it relates to what goes on in our community, because that's the criticism. And it's important that people see that it's not personal. It's not me or Steph saying this is the lay of the land, or us saying like this is the woke agenda. It's saying, look, this is what things look like right now. If you provide a platform for wildness, the details matter. Is it your platform, or are you platforming somebody problematic? Are you just platforming someone problematic, or is there reasonable criticalness and pushback? Are you platforming with the intention that this is part of the work to make some sort of progress on this issue? Or is it just to have a wild and out stream where potentially there's harm to some of the participants, but this isn't necessarily intended for their benefit? And then that's going to be that criticism and concern. It's not to say you can't do it, but these are the layers, right? We started saying it's going to be about layers and nuances, and these are some of the layers in the nuance. All right, let's get through some of this. I love this. It's been a great stream. Thanks so much for being here, Steph.
Worth cautioning that de-radicalization is often a messy and incomplete process. 20-year-old white nationalist Peter Saitanovic became the face of the fascist Unite the Right rally in 2017 when a photo of him mid-scream, tiki torch in hand, was published in news outlets all over the country. Peter was unrepentant in interviews he gave immediately after the rally, but he began to question his beliefs after befriending a Muslim woman who, according to Charlotte McDonald Gibson, challenged his views without insulting him, allowing him to understand the hurt he had caused. Peter is no longer a white nationalist, but that doesn't mean he's flushed out every trace of bigotry. In a 2019 interview with the London School of Economics student paper, Peter said,
"I don't like the whole transgender thing. You're born either a man or a woman."
So he maybe still has a little bit of work to do. When I did de-radicalization work on YouTube, I used to get some criticism from people of color who were not thrilled that I was bringing a bunch of semi-reformed racists over to the left, a frustration that I totally understand. To paraphrase YouTuber Ian Danskin, diverse leftist communities are maybe not the best holding space for someone who's
a bit of a Nazi but working on it.
In the case of Megan Phelps-Roper, I don't
Bing! And that's the take-home message, y'all. Diverse communities are not the best holding places for people who are Nazis but working on it. Oh, that was epic. That was epic style. Let's go back. I need to hear that again. That was a good one.
Thrilled that I was bringing a bunch of semi-reformed racists over to the left, a frustration that I totally understand. To paraphrase YouTuber Ian Danskin, diverse leftist communities are maybe not the best holding space for someone who's
a bit of a Nazi but working on it.
In the case of Megan Phelps Roper, I don't know if she has lingering bigoted sentiments, but what she does have is a kind of hyper-vigilant skepticism about anything she perceives as ideology. This is pretty common with people who used to be religious fundamentalists. They were so certain they were right, only to realize that everything they believed about the world is wrong. So they become distrustful of any strong moral convictions because it reminds them of their former fanaticism.
All right, that's the part I caught. That is the whole reason for this. That was when I was like, oh, this video is saying something we need to be talking about right now. And again, guys, remember we started local. We go out to how it applies to the bigger community. Now we bring it back into the small scale of where we can be actually effective. And here is the challenge that I'm realizing with y'all, okay? This overall problem, just like the, I'm gonna put it this way. So what is the Megan Phelps Roper? That's the person she's responding to, correct?
Yeah. Megan Phelps Roper is Fred Phelps' daughter.
So Megan,
Westboro Baptist Church guy.
Okay, right. This is so great. So Megan is the star of this show, for lack of a better way of putting it, because her experience makes her story uniquely susceptible, right, to this issue. That's kind of how it fits into the bigger picture. When you bring it back to our community, our whole community is full of people like this. So at one time, our community, this is where the sphere of influence we can actually have. So to the extent that we want to work against transphobia and racism and misogyny and class war and on the list goes, as a progressive community, because that's what I feel like the community I'm all about is a part of. We can do things by getting organized amongst ourselves, having influence one another, but at the same time, we have to recognize so many of us are either still dealing with these high demand groups, or we're just fresh out of them, or we have a family and support system that's steeped in these. How many of us are, in my case, the grandson of a minister, but how many of us come from ministerial family? Steph is the preacher's daughter, right? So like, this is real for us. You see what I'm saying? And so it's the blessing and the curse is that, think about the fact that, to me, it's so powerful that this has been such a great video, but it's because this person's unique story is such a great thing to take on, to see all this play out. And we have a community full of stories like this. So I think that's kind of, it's a power. I think that's probably why this video touched off so much on these channels.
Keep it rolling.
Yeah, let's do it.
Coming from Westboro, where I believed so strongly that I was doing the right thing, and then to leave and come to believe that it was so destructive and harmful, I had this moment in time, and it lasted for many months, where I was like, how can I ever trust my own mind again?
This kind of skepticism is in some ways a good impulse, but valuing dispassionate intellectualism above all else can cause problems, especially where topics of social justice are concerned. Because it can lead you to this kind of toxic centrism that asks, why are marginalized people so unwilling to have calm, philosophical debates about whether they should have rights? Are they afraid of dangerous ideas? Atheist philosopher Sam Harris, in his podcast about Megan's podcast, can we talk about how there are too many podcasts? I'm calling for a complete and total shutdown of podcasts until we can figure out what's going on.
Gotta go.
Why she wanna leave me alone? Saying all I do is wrong. No rights when they been left turned. on before. Sometimes she don't wanna be alone. Most times she don't want me gone. She don't know I try my all. She don't know I sprung in the summer, but I'm going in the winter, so we good to the fall. Remember how I told you I get it and I win. Now I'm got it, you ain't answer my call. Wonder if I've been moving too strong. Maybe I just been moving too boss. Really hate when the feeling get lost.
All right. That was one for the OGs. We haven't done a false ending in a while. You know, I haven't stormed off randomly in a minute. So, it was a great opportunity. Good times.
Sam Harris, in his podcast about Megan's podcast, complained that trans activism and activism in general is plagued by mental illness and hysteria.
I frankly think there's a fair degree of mental instability and even frank mental illness in the activist community. I mean, in really in all activist communities, the level of viciousness and hysteria is, it's hard to know what to compare it to.
Diversity wins.
All right, gang. This is something really interesting, and this is something that some of y'all are aware, but like Pine Creek was giving us some criticism, and he was throwing in this sort of insinuation that me and most of my community are, must be having some serious mental health problems, and I don't know. I was on a stream the other day, and I let it go that I was bipolar. Ironically, to empathize with somebody else on the panel who was not there to help me. I'll put it that way. But it was a genuine moment of connection. And as soon as I said it, the person was like, "Well, that was a mistake." Like the person that was going at me was, literally like, "Gotcha!" Like, "Oh my goodness, you shouldn't even said that!" Like, and it really, and it's. I was thinking about that because of course that's such a, you do kind of blame yourself for letting too much information go, especially when you're not in a safe space. But it's something that I've been thinking about recently because I feel like most people know, like, I don't really hide that I'm bipolar. Like, I don't really have, I don't have a problem with it. And by that, I don't mean that it's not a problem. I just mean, like I always tell people, I manage it and I do my best to treat it and live with it. But if somebody offered me a cure or told me I could get rid of it, I probably wouldn't do that. And it's just because my lived experience is what it is, my personality is what it is, and I wouldn't change that. And ironically, having bipolar has helped me understand that and learn who I am, because there have been times that it has been treated and managed so intensively that I didn't feel like myself. Like I lost my natural kind of sway. And I realized that that's just a big part of my personality. And so if you make me feel like too constrained, you'll actually strip me of my motivation to do the things that are important to me and my ability to enjoy my life. Like I kind of need the ability to ride that edge. And so, right, like being manic is helpful when you have to do hard, underpaid work and you need to be motivated to put in long hours to do creative stuff. And go ahead, Steph.
The old Tom Waits lyric: "If I exercise my devils, my angels may leave too." When they do, it's so hard to find.
Exactly. But I've also realized that has to be part of this conversation. A big part of the way we're understanding social issues these days is in terms of intersectionality. And we cannot create a situation where we say that, part of people need to have access to their full range of responses. And if someone is, managing or dealing with their mental health situation, that's their business. And if you know that, that certainly not should be a license to be insensitive to that person or mistreat that person or even denigrate that feelings. Like, even if you feel something like, oh, well, when Jay thinks something's insensitive or bigoted, he's gonna fly off at the handle. And part of the reason he flies off is because he's just a little bipolar at the end of the day. Like, well, okay, like you have to recognize that part of the lived experience of Black people is some of us are bipolar. And part of racial sensitivity would be understanding that intersectionality and not being like, oh, well, you know, there's a certain amount of racial sensitivity that I tolerate, and as long as nobody crazy's in the room, everything should be all right, right? Like that's not the fucking solution. So you just have to recognize you do some racially insensitive shit, you might upset Black people. Some of those Black people may or may not have other issues that they're dealing with. And that is not permission to be insensitive or to invalidate someone's feelings because you think they have other issues in addition to your inappropriate behavior. So, you know, that's just something I wanted to like touch on with that. Like, I'm not gonna feel some sense of shame, like, oh, I'd be a more effective anti-racism voice if I wasn't bipolar. And I always say this for people who are genuinely concerned. It's kind of funny to me because, again, bipolar is a thing you have to learn to deal with, and I've had to deal with explicitly most of my adult life. So it's kind of funny that people who really don't know you that well just assume somehow you've made it this far in life without learning to cope. So I'm always reminding people I take my medication every day. I see my shrink regularly. Like, I'm managing my bipolar. So let's you know, stay on focus with the issues here. It was funny, Steph. There was a time I used to keep my medicine bag under the desk, and I'd say, you know, most of the people in Gather see me take my medication. But that was always a good help. Maybe I'll start doing that again so I can have witnesses to my mental health management.
Man accuses trans women of being hysterical. Is it really hysteria to react with strong emotions when your basic inclusion in society is up for debate? Aren't there certain situations where strong emotions are warranted? It reminds me of this awful episode of Joe Rogan feat Ben Shapiro, where Lil Benny argues that gay marriage is immoral with his usual whining sophistry, and Joe gently raises objections for Ben to talk circles around.
The human sex drive was made to procreate within a stable relationship in order to progenerate and have future generations of people. Misuse of that sex drive in any way, whether you're talking about from masturbation to homosexual activity, is therefore a diminishment of the use of that drive. That's the natural law case against homosexual activity.
All of the top comments on this video are like this.
Imagine talking about
Who cares? I just can't imagine. What a stupid ass. And this is what I mean. Like, and I mean this sincerely. I don't want people I like to sound that dumb when they say things because it's hurtful to me. It hurts my feelings when people embarrass themselves like that. What's up, Nitty?
Hey. Yeah, I was just about
to
say before you move on from the mental health thing.
Sure.
Most mental health conditions are an entire gradation, right? They're not like, bipolar, write-offable, can't do anything with that person. Like, especially if you're actively getting treatment, you're regulating yourself. You're getting more to the baselines that everyone accepts and no one would notice.
Right? Yeah.
Any motherfucker that comes in and says, oh, you're bipolar, now I'm going to ignore you. Or, oh, that makes sense of why you're so stanced up, you know, you have these strong stances, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, motherfucker, no, I'm working to be more average, right? And, you know, this is probably, maybe you're the one disconnected from reality that you aren't strongly reacting to this.
Well, that's, you know, there's probably, you know, something there, right? I've in the sense that I've always felt a certain privilege or benefit to being in a range where management helps a great deal, you know, whatever that means, and also then having access to the resources and the care, and you do wonder about what people are going through, where they hang on to certain things. Like that's like, I do, you know, you can't help but wonder, right? Because I'm always like, why do people get off on this? Like, why is this what you're into? Or like, why are they so caught in their feels about these things, right? These just seems like things you don't even want to, most of us don't even want to play with. But yeah, appreciate you being here. Yeah, let's go ahead and, Steph, did you want to say anything? You want to roll tape?
Roll tape.
Different beliefs while still having a productive conversation. Things progress when you don't demonize people.
The discussion here was excellent. Two guys with opposing opinions, speaking calmly and intellectually without cursing, shouting and making disparaging comments about each other. This is how it should be done. Kudos to both of them.
Joe is a great interviewer. He can totally disagree with someone and still have a calm, collective conversation. This is how it should be. Just two people sharing ideas, learning different point of views from each other. This is why Joe is the #1 podcast.
Joe.
All right, so this is also I laughingly refer to this thing called a white boy problem, right? And this is a good example of that to me, and I say that like affectionately, because I think there's too many implications that anytime you call out a demographic, you're calling out a problem with that demographic, and you're saying that they're bigoted or problematic. And that's why I'm not saying that. Like, if I wanted to be like, white people are evil and this is racist, then I'd say like, this is the problem with fucking racism, or like, this is the problem with the white racism towards black people. No, it's like different. It's like this thing, like I grew up the only black kid in the all white school. So there was a lot of shit that I got exposed to that people in my family weren't exposed to. And when you explain that shit, they're like, oh yeah, that's that white people shit. He goes to school with white people. That's why, that's why he likes country music. And that's why he does this. And that's why he's into that, right? So there's a culture there. And you're like, yo, that culture is cool, but can y'all recognize your culture? So here's an example. This thing about let's sit around and have like this civilized parlor discussion, it just feels like an aesthetic of that culture, like the whole politics and civility thing. Whereas it makes it feel as though if you see people getting really animated or yelling or getting up and down in their chairs and stuff and cursing a lot, it's assumed that they're like aggressive or that they're out of control with their emotions. Whereas to me, that sounds like some niggas sitting around in the barbershop, and that sounds like a way more interesting conversation. Like, that's how I grew up. Like, I grew up sitting around my family watching wildin' ass out black comedians who were yelling, cursing, or just raging out as they tell stories, and fucking love it. Fucking love it. That's the barbershop vibe. That's why you want to go to the barbershop. You're hoping to see some people just saying some wild shit or getting in an argument. They get a barbershop argument, like people are going to be going at each other's throats, but it might be over like who's the better backup point guard for the Knicks. Nobody gives a shit, right? It's just a fun animated way to like conversate with your friends, right? And so part of what I feel goes on like this is these cultural aesthetics. And I sometimes refer to it as a white boy problem. It's probably not the best way of doing it, but but this is what I mean. It's like it's a certain preference or a certain vibe. Like there's certain social customs, and then people who may be a little bit outside of those, you kind of see it or interpret it through a particular lens because it seems so abnormal. Whereas to some of us, it's just like a difference in style, or, some of us are just a bit more animated with ours. It doesn't necessarily, have to mean that we're super aggressive or, we've lost our ability to regulate.
Joe Rogan beautifully asks the tough questions, and Ben answers honestly. He is strong in his faith. I love this debate because it's two so contrasting views and they have a civil conversation. Great learning.
And yeah, it's easy for two straight men to have a dispassionate, theoretical conversation about the ethics of homosexuality because it's not their lives and their relationships that are up for debate. These people don't understand the emotional burden placed on marginalized people who are asked to defend their rights. If you're straight, do you want to publicly debate whether your marriage is valid? Andrew Dworkin claimed that penetrative heterosexual intercourse is inherently an act of violence. I've noticed that most straight men don't want to have a calm, civil conversation about that. So imagine how they'd react if there was a powerful political movement to criminalize penetration or revoke their right to marry. Add in a lifetime of ostracism, family rejection, bullying, and discrimination, and maybe then you'll begin to understand the hysteria of a lot of queer people.
Now, look, I dealt with a lot of teasing growing up, and this is one of the things that touched me. One of the things we got to revisit, man. We did a Trans is Beautiful Day, and that was one of the fucking best days we've had on this stream. And we did a movie night afterwards, and I fucking loved that shit. But I remember those were fucking awesome movies. But one of the things that stuck with me, Steph, was the misgendering within the household. And the ways in which a trans young person's whole life is filled with some of the scorn, often from a parent, because again, like she talked about, the wrong star of the show, right? Their primary concern is not, oh my goodness, my lovely daughter, let me see everything I can do to help her. It's, my son is not going to turn out to be one of them. You understand? And I had to throw back to my experience and go, yeah, there was teasing from my cousins and my step siblings about being white and not really being black and all of this because of the way I dressed and the school I went to and the difference in my environment and the way I talked. All of it. But those stories broke my hearts because I never got anything like that, obviously, from my parents, right? Or my grandparents, or there was teasing from your cousins or whatever, but everybody gets teasing from their cousins for whatever's different about them, right? But seeing that rejection from a parent, it made me go, when somebody knowingly misgender somebody or refuses correction on that, it may seem like such a simple infraction to those of us on the outside. But again, like she said, when you tie it to potentially a life history that goes all the way back to a rejection from a parent, nevertheless, what you faced from the outside world, you recognize that's a potential wound you want no parts of reopening. None at all. Steph, I wonder if you want to say anything before I go on.
No.
Appreciate you.
It is my right to raise my child with the moral precepts that I find to be beneficial for my child. Beto O'Rourke does not get to raise my child. And if he tries, I will meet him at the door with a gun. That is insane.
Wow, Ben Shapiro threatening violence because he can't handle the debate. Sounds like a classic case of hysteria to me. Why can't Ben Shapiro just have a polite conversation about Beto O'Rourke transing his children?
I now have two choices. One is to leave the country utterly. Two is to pick up a gun. Those are the only choices that you have left me.
Dave Rubin is a gay conservative.
Pause the tape. Nobody, nowhere, no how is trying to trans Ben Shapiro's children. That is a figment of his imagination. And this is what Sam Harris calls just two guys sitting down having a quiet conversation. No, that's incendiary. It's meant to get a rise. And it's meant to get a rise, not because of any trans person's desires. I mean, unlike Ben, we're not evangelists. I personally wouldn't wish the struggles of being trans on anyone, especially not in this climate when you have lunatics like Shapiro saying someone's out to change the gender identities, the internal gender identity of his children. Of course not. That's ridiculous. Who would want to do that?
Right.
I mean, it's just, and it's the same language that was used about queer people generally forever and ever. I mean, Ben would maybe feel the same way if one of his children was gay, but he wouldn't say it because it's not, maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. I don't know if anybody's ever asked him, but it used to be, it's the language of groomers, and I have my fake penis, my metal penis ready to pop off on anybody who comes in to queer my kids or trans my kids or this or that. That's not, people think I'm unstable. Really?
Yeah. That's
who's doing that.
And this is a thing that happens too. And I want to speak to this because there's mechanisms by which all this plays out. And one of them is, and I always say this when people come with the accusations of cancel culture and tribalism and all of this, notice how they only bring that critique to one side. They never go to the other side where they know it'll fall on deaf ears. But I noticed this with sort of tying back to your previous critique about the false narratives in the debates, where there's no effort for these. Here's the issue for content creators and people with platforms to consider. Who do you give your pushback to? There's, like you said, there's never anyone actually trying to trans these people's kids, right? But what I find to be problematic is there really isn't people who push back when they put forth this narrative. And that's what gives the false impression. And then when you go to the left or the other side, now all of a sudden there's a lot of critique. Well, yeah, okay, so gender affirming care, but there are more trans kids now than ever. So don't they have a point there about maybe they're trans in the kids, right? And do you have a double-blind study about the fact that no one will ever self-harm if they do gender affirming care, right? They'll just create, like, there's all these problematics, right? And they never turn around with any of that. So one side gets the free pass, which is usually ironically the side that's pushing a bunch of nonsense. And then there's the host or the moderator sort of plays this sort of faux critical participant thing, but it's really only ever directed at one side. And it bugs me so much because I'm just trying to show people like how this shit happens, because it's so frustrating to feel like people don't see what's going on. Sorry, I'm screen deficient. Here we go.
Whose career requires that he convince his right-wing audience that he's one of the good ones. This means that he's willing to sit across from his so-called friend, homophobe Ben Shapiro, and listen to Ben say he would never attend his anniversary party because it would be tantamount to endorsing sin.
There's a difference between me just being friends with Dave and me actively participating in an event that I feel is religiously sinful.
The two of them then congratulate themselves about how they can still be great friends.
Why is it that we're able to do this? and most people can't do this.
That's what boom. I got to tell you guys this, because this touch, man. I'm not gonna name names on this one because I don't want to. But look, I'm gonna tell you from the perspective of a black dude who doesn't know your friendship. The reason they can do it is because you make them comfortable. When you come to me and you want to, and this is right back to the Daryl Davis problem. It is sometimes celebrating the idea that two people with strongly quote unquote opposing viewpoints can sit down and hash it out civilly. But quite often, it's because one party isn't really bringing up the opposition. It is just a person who is willing to be chummy, oftentimes for their own benefit. That's what it feels like. And that's what I think, like Maya would call selling us up the river, right? It's like the idea is you go to tell the marginalized people, hey, I'm only friends with so-and-so because I'm hoping I can get through to him. And, I'm hoping that, just by shooting hoops with them after school and, playing a little Call of Duty from time to time, that, my good influence is going to rub off on them. And then as soon as that happens, I'm going to let them, I'm almost assuredly just going to be able to make them stop being a bigot. You wait and see. And then as that process plays out, there's a lot of playing basketball, there's a lot of Call of Duty, there's a lot of sharing mom's lasagna, but the tough conversations are always intended to come down the line. And so, again, I know this is a complete cold read. I don't even know who I'm talking to. I don't know the friendship you're talking about. I don't know what's going on in your head, but I'm completely cold reading your situation with your slightly bigoted friend. And the reason your slightly bigoted friend is comfortable having all those great, wonderful times and harmonious experiences with you is because you do not bring up the fact that this is a slightly bigoted friend.
We go home at night and we can have our own lives.
And here's Dave having a civil conversation with conservative Glenn Beck, who compares homosexuality to alcoholism and then congratulates himself on having the conversation.
I'm a deeply religious man, and my religion says man and a woman, that is the basic building block of family. And that's what I believe, but I also am... I also know God created you just like he created me, flaws and all. I believe I have a gene, they've never found it, that makes me very susceptible to alcoholism because it runs in my family. So does craziness, but it runs in my family.
Well, Dave smiles and nods, probably because he's thinking about how much he enjoys the taste of boots.
Usually, I just take out a picture of me and DeSantis, and then we're good because they get it. They get it. That's my governor. Yeah.
I think a lot of straight people look at Dave Rubin and they see, finally, a reasonable gay person who doesn't scream bigot at everyone who disagrees and can actually have a civil conversation. But that's not what I see. I look at Dave Rubin and I see a spineless, bootlicking doormat who won't even defend his own family from the most fundamental disrespect. I also can't help but notice that none of these civil conversations seem to change anyone's mind.
Boom.
Persuasion is more complicated and less rational than people think. Megan often says that she was de-radicalized on Twitter, but if you read her book carefully, you'll notice that that's not exactly true. The major precipitating event for Megan's crisis of faith was her mother's mistreatment at the hands of an increasingly misogynistic church leadership that made Megan feel like she was the victim of the church for once. She says of the church discipline, "For the first time in my life, the accused were people I lived with and knew most intimately, and I knew that the judgments leveled by the elders were wrong. I could no longer blindly trust the judgment of these men." So she finally experienced firsthand what it's like to be the victim of her family. She stopped voting for the leopards eating people's faces party only when the leopards ate her face. It also seems relevant to notice that the people who had calm, civil conversations with Meghan on Twitter were generally not gay people, the people most affected by her family's violent rhetoric.
Boom.
They were mostly straight men, like director
Boom.
Kevin Smith, who started hashtag Save Meghan because, quote, she's hot. There's often a neurotic component to
just not the way to go with that. Sorry about that. Yeah. It sucks. That's intersectionality, folks. Is sometimes people trying to stand up for you, but missing it often have their own problematic bigotries that come out in these situations. That was a rough one. But yeah, this is that vibe, right? And I want us to think about it in terms of demographics, right? We're in a situation where a lot of the content creators and a lot of the people in our space are straight white men. That is an observation I am sure that if you don't trust me with, you can ask many of your favorite content creators who have access to the demographics of their subs, and they probably don't even want to show you how much the overwhelming majority of their viewership is male and white. And so why does that matter? It's not a value judgment. It's not at all to make anybody feel bad about who they are. Like, matter of fact, I say, if you're genuinely an ally in this space, and by ally, I am in this instance gonna allow people to self-identify, just hoping that as part of that, you take it seriously, that you are, in effect, speaking with marginalized people and not for them, in accordance with what you have come to understand from them as their best interest. I think you should be proud of yourself that you're in these spaces, and even the fact that you're thinking about this or watching these type of streams and participating in these conversations is a real indication that even if you're like not in the chat, that you're at least thinking about what goes on, how to properly address it. And in some way, even as hard as all this stuff can be sometimes for somebody like me, because I've been affected by it, not just as part of the group, but personally, I really do celebrate the fact that I recognize that this is part of the solution I'm asking for. Right? What I'm asking for is to live in a world where I don't have to be there to have the racism addressed, to where I don't have to lead the charge against bigotry in the atheist community. But in order to get there, right, we have to create the situation in which, when Black people, trans people, and women aren't around, racism, misogyny, and queer phobia can be dealt with effectively by people who don't necessarily identify as those things. So, a bunch of white guys sitting around talking about these things is fucking fruitful ground for practice. And anybody else participating in those spaces where you can contribute and help and bring some perspective to those conversations, I commend the fuck out of that too. So yeah, I really don't want people to think that I'm here to be like, yo, this is like, oh, these are bad people. It's like, no, this is just the demographics of what it is. And with that in mind, we can take this as information. Right? This is information. Oh, okay. We have a lot of people who are of this demographic that may take a certain approach and tone to these conversations. Number one, because this is a unique space in new media where they come to have these type of discussions. And number two, they're often trying to work through issues that they're not directly affected by. And when you put those two things together, they can kind of reinforce the politics of civility. And then when people speak up from that or outside that perspective, it's hard to hear them, because it's always hard to understand a perspective that's represented by fewer people. That's right. Like, you know, you are at odds with the room when your tact is not the common tone. So I hope we can all hold hands and say that we're going to have maybe some uncomfortable conversations. I'm always happy to get feedback on how I can approach these things better myself. But I think we can work towards a place of understanding. So yeah, let's go.
Persuasion, and that certainly seems to be the case with Megan, because one of the people who helped de-radicalize her is now her husband. And I feel like that's a relevant detail if we're trying to understand the role of reason and emotion in de-radicalization experiences. I think this experience is usually more akin to religious conversion than it is to logical reasoning. There's also a world of difference between the mostly private conversations that actually lead people to reflect on their beliefs and the spectacle of public debate. Ben Shapiro is never going to become less homophobic because he live streamed a civil conversation with Dave Rubin. So who is this conversation even for? Well, obviously it's for the audience. I think these civil conversations basically function to reassure a homophobic audience that just because they disagree with the lifestyle doesn't mean that they hate gay people. Look at Ben Shapiro. He's friends with a gay. Public debate is one way that we define the limits of the Overton window, the range of beliefs that is socially acceptable to hold. So often people who want to promote bigotry will use debate as a foot in the door. It's a way of establishing that their prejudices are within the realm of reasonable and socially accepted opinion. Here's obsessive anti-trans bigot Graham Linehan in a fury that a drag queen is on Doctor Who without the British public having a proper debate about these issues. Now, why do we need to have a proper debate about whether drag queens should be allowed on television when drag performance has been a staple of British entertainment since at least the time of Shakespeare?
Life is a joke that's just begun. Three little maids from school. Fishy, 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 fish.
As I am man, my state is desperate for my master's love. As I am woman, now alas the day.
Bigots like Graham want a perpetual debate on their own terms because this is how they dignify their pearl clutching. It's how they convince the public that their moral panic about drag queens on TV is actually a valid concern, rather than the tedious, small-minded whining about nothing that it really is. Having the debate on a bigot's terms is not a good way to win people over, unless you're really skilled in the art of humiliating people, which most of the time is what public debate is actually about. This is something that J.K. Rowling doesn't seem to understand. In the Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, Joro takes a contradictory stance on deplatforming. She brings up right-wing provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos, saying that activists are making a strategic error and giving Milo power by protesting his events, making him look dangerous and sexy. But when trans people try to deplatform TERFs, Rowling characterizes this as silencing. So is deplatforming a strategic error that gives power to your opponent? Or is it a powerful tactic of silencing? I find Rowling's conviction that we ought to debate Milo Yiannopoulos really out of touch. Milo Yiannopoulos doesn't have reasons for the things he does. He has strategies for humiliating people.
I've taken some time out of
All right, so before we let this Milo part roll, I want to speak a little bit to how this whole thing plays out in making people feel uncomfortable in their own spaces, because it's important for me to address it before we get too far away from this idea of the Overton window. So let's say someone just like, all right, yeah, because I want to keep it about like what can happen in our community. So let's say somebody, you host a debate on your channel or you host a conversation, and as part of that conversation, you have people participating who have potentially problematic views. All right, well, as a result of that, right, because it's a public thing you just did, and there's going to be a live chat, and people are going to be exchanging ideas, and there's going to be follow-up, and there's going to be other panelists jumping in, right? So you, in some sense, are signaling to people that this discourse is within the Overton window of what's publicly acceptable on your channel, both in terms of who's on it and what goes on in the chat. Well, that signals to other people that you have influence on in this community that you would find it acceptable in their channels. Well, other people in chat get that cue. And so when these people come to new conversations and other channels and other discussions, the window of what's acceptable to contribute to the conversation has already been pushed enough, right? And it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't go off about this here because we didn't go off about it when we had this conversation yesterday, right? Now, that's whatever, right? That's typical YouTube bullshit, and it's fine, right? But what happens for people impacted by those conversations is there's like a creep outwards, and it severely reduces where you feel comfortable interacting. It's something I noticed happening when I started talking about trans issues, and I feel it's a really important issue, so it just has to get done, and I'm happy to do it, and happy to be filled in and how I could do better. But one of the things that I don't like about it is that if you're a trans person watching any day, you know, like today, you know, you show up to a video supposed to be about racism, and it could turn out to be about trans issues, right? There's like every day. And I'm always conscientious of that. And so, of course, to me, that's why being clear about where you stand is so important, so that at least people can hopefully clearly identify that this is somewhere that I want them to feel safe, and I take that seriously, and will not put the comfort of bigots before the safety of marginalized people. And I hope my moderators know and feel free to act based on that priority. But yeah, that's what sucked, and I've been kind of dealing with that lately, where I've been dealing with some problematic people, and as they've been able to sort of become comfortable in more and more channels in this space of YouTube, there are now more and more channels where I've got to go and be prepared that they're potentially going to be there, or, you know, could start a potentially problematic interaction, or I've got to, you know, put on an extra layer of being up for dealing with bigots today or whatever. And a lot of times you don't. And so you just kind of passively and quietly withdraw because you feel like there are fewer and fewer spaces worth the risk of engaging. And it is what it is, but I think it was something I want to speak to since we're having this conversation today. What's up, Steph?
You know, I think when it comes to issues of bigotry and racism generally, and bigotry writ large, doesn't matter what the out group is. There's always going to be intersectionality there, because at root it comes from fear, comes from people's fear of the other. And when you see a movement or movement toward amplifying fear as regards other human beings, you've got to stop that. You know, you got to throw the brakes on that. It's like I think one of our guests was bringing up the trolley problem or something like this, and or at least I noticed comment on that, and in the midst of another conversation that I was engaged in, that analogy was put forward by someone, and I said, well, the solution to the trolley problem really is not, is to go after the people that set it up. Who tied the people to the tracks in the first place?
Yes, right.
The dilemma is there for the
Right.
person to switch, but somebody set that situation up so that person had to make that choice.
Right.
And so, step back, look at the deeper
100%.
things that set up that problem. I mean, sure, it's a classic problem, and it illustrates something, but it assumes that whoever tied the people down in the first place were innocent, and that's not the case.
Exactly. And
so I'm seeing what I'm seeing here in the situation with Shapiro hating on Black Lives Matter, or hating on gay people, or hating on trans people, or all of this other stuff. Ben Shapiro's the guy that's tying the people down to the tracks.
Right.
And you need to look that deep at the problems of bigotry and racism and solve it at that level before you put someone in on the switch.
Yes. And then the thing that I feel is happening in the and this ties into Daryl Davis thing, because that's the problem. If you are sitting down, if Daryl Davis is sitting down with somebody who, he's trying to get through to, I'm happy to do that he's doing that. But if you're just sitting down with somebody who's saying, well, I tied the people there because I really just wanted to test people's morality and see what people's sensitivity calculations are. Right, to your point. Oh, well, no. Now that's the guy we got to go upside his head, because that's the person who really needs to be held responsible for this whole thing. Yeah, we missed this. We missed this to jump straight into the philosophical discussion.
Well, that's why the philosophical discussions are important, because you gotta you do get there eventually. It's like, well, they can be boring, but it helps to jump out of them. It helps to tie them to real world consequences, to me. I mean, I think that philosophical discussions are, in fact, incredibly boring when they're not related to real actions and the real things that go on, because I think they can inform that. I think they're being knowledgeable in logic and philosophy and all that stuff is helpful, but only if it touches the real thing. Because if it's simply abstraction, then it's simply masturbation.
Yes.
And you're sitting there just trying to show how fucking clever you are.
Yes.
You can't tie it to something in the real world.
Yeah.
Does it matter?
Does it matter? Absolutely.
I mean, that's the problem. You can go and talk about the infallibility of the Bible. Well, that matters because it redounds down consequences if you take the Bible as written by a God and is the infallible word of God, then you better not be wearing, clothes that are made of two different fibers.
Right.
And, so there is a place where discussions like this actually hit the real world, because laws are made on that basis, and social bargaining is done on the basis of those priors. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Cut the fucking ropes, guys.
Yeah.
Don't just settle for the fucking problem. Solve the problem.
Damn
Don't
straight.
let people tie people to the railroad tracks and put somebody with a lever to make that choice.
Abso-fucking-lutely. Abso-fucking-lutely.
Being fabulous and doing my hair to prepare a speech for you. Well, a few remarks, really. Feminism is cancer. Thank you very much.
To again quote Ian Danskin,
wow.
You can't really reason with someone who thinks that feminism is cancer, because you don't reason with cancer, you eradicate it. Rowling objects to the slogan, no debate, in the strongest possible terms.
And then we come to the famous two-word slogan, the stock phrase, no debate, no debate, no debate. We hear it all the time. That alarms me, really alarms me. I can't think of a purer instance of authoritarianism than no debate.
It's kind of amazing to me that someone could think angry trans people on Twitter are the purest example of authoritarianism. I truly hope that one day I am privileged enough to be capable of such a perspective. Before I move on, I do want to clarify that I do think there are trans issues that are legitimately debatable by people who are not bigots. In my opinion, trans women in women's sports is one of those issues. But it's a complicated issue. Like, first of all, which sport are we talking about? Are we talking about figure skating? Middle school field hockey? I see no reason why trans girls should be excluded from that. But if we're talking about professional weightlifting, well, then it seems plausible that trans women who have been through male puberty may still retain some kind of group advantage. But not all trans women have experienced male puberty.
But they don't. And that's important. The science says they don't.
But at least, yes, I'm willing to.
Yes.
It's certainly.
But it's a discussion. There it is. Yeah.
And it is, it is really a sport by sport thing. I mean, I know this issue altogether too well, but
yeah. And the other thing is to keep in line with the theme of today. I'm very hesitant to have the discussion. And I'm very hesitant about who I'm having the discussion with and why I'm having the discussion. Because for the most part, I think people who I consider to be good faith actors on this issue don't want to have the discussion for the reasons that we should want to set aside certain things from public discourse. In this case, being there's a overarching advocacy for trans rights that I think is fundamental right now. I think we need to all be on board with that. And that is a particularly nuanced discussion, similar to the particulars of the medical care, that a lot of us are bowing out simply on the regard of we're going to leave that to the experts and go with the experts, right? And so therefore my immediate on guard is when somebody brings it up, I'm like, why are you bringing this up? And my immediate instinct is I'm on alarm for the fact that, again, why is this the thing you want to discuss? And that's kind of where I'm at with so much of this. Is I find it usually problematic why people want to bring it up to begin with, right? Most of us know we don't know. Go ahead, Steph.
Nothing. I'm just looking at side chat.
Oh, okay.
Transitioning younger now, and that's another thing you have to consider. So I'm not against debating this issue, I just want people to approach it with nuance and good faith. And currently, A lot of the people who are vocally against trans women in women's sports sound like this.
And we will keep men out of women's sports. Right?
Yeah,
How ridiculous.
That's the debate I'm not willing to have.
That will take place on day one.
And I don't want to debate those people. I want to serve them a banana cream pie. Chapter 6.
All right, so that's the chapter I wanted to get through for this. Although it's a fantastic video, but a long one, and I thought that was the portion that was particularly relevant to what I was calling the Daryl Davis problem. Which, again, to be clear, is not me having a personal problem with Daryl Davis, but rather how his example is used as a sort of racial example of what Megan was talking about, which is this, or sorry, with ContraPoints was talking about, which is this, we need to be willing to have these polite, civilized discussions about these issues and using that against marginalized people. So yeah, that's and it's a real problem in this community that I've been experiencing lately, because there's been so much of this discourse and debate, and it has been, in my mind, expanding that Overton windows in ways I've found very surprising. But yeah, that's it for me, man. This was super fun. I really wanted to have a discussion about both of these things, and was glad I found the way to tie them together. I was really glad that Steph joined me, and that I found sort of a productive headspace to try to address these things. But yeah, Steph, I'm open. I don't know if Nitty's here. If anybody has anything else, I'm not in a rush to end the stream, but I got through what I wanted to get through. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about any other thoughts. Go ahead, Steph.
Yeah, we've been at this for a while, Jay.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting you to be here this long, but maybe we can. I'm sure there's more to talk about.
Yeah. We can go ahead and shoot her in the head. Appreciate everybody. Yeah, I didn't know how long the stream was going to be. I probably won't. Haven't done a stream this long in a while, but it's been fun, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget the gather link is pinned in the chat. It's also in the description, and we'll see you next time. Said I'm gone.
Why she wanna leave me alone? Saying all I do is wrong. No rights, only been left turns. Playing that she gotta let it burn. Saying that the house not a home. Sunshine cause she heard it all before. Sometimes she don't wanna be alone. Most times she don't want me gone. She don't know I try my all. She don't know I sprung in the sun, but I'm going in the winter, so we good to the fall. Remember how I told you I get it and I win now?